you're 3 seconds away from another emotional reaction that could cost you everything. This audiobook will show you how to transform those critical moments into opportunities that change your life. The Power of Not Reacting. Audiobook by Rowan March, published by Inner Impact Books. Introduction. Your hands shake as you stare at the message that just popped up on your screen. Blood rushes to your face, and your fingers hover over the keyboard, ready to fire back a response you know you'll regret. In that moment, everything else fades away. Your carefully built reputation, your values, your goals, all consumed by an overwhelming urge to react. We've all been there. That split second when emotion hijacks our brain and drives us toward actions that can undo years of relationship building, career advancement, or personal growth. In today's hyper-connected world, these trigger points surround us like never before. The passive-aggressive email from a colleague, the inflammatory social media post, the cutting remark from someone you love, each one a potential landmine in a landscape designed to provoke reaction. The cost of emotional reactivity has never been higher. A single impulsive response can go viral, derail a career, or fracture relationships instantly. Yet here's what most people don't realize. Your most powerful response often comes from not responding at all. This isn't about suppressing emotions or maintaining rigid control. It's about developing a superpower that few understand, but anyone can master: the ability to create space between stimulus and response. This space is where your true power lies. It's where wisdom emerges, where strategy forms, and where you take back control of your story. By mastering this art of non-reaction, you'll develop an unshakable inner stability that transforms every aspect of your life. Your relationships will deepen, your career will accelerate, and you'll experience a level of personal fulfillment that comes only from knowing you're in complete command of your responses. Chapter 1. The Hidden Cost of Reaction. Your palms sweat as you sit across the negotiation table. Months of preparation have led to this moment, a potential 8-figure deal that could transform your company's future. The other party's lead negotiator leans forward, a slight smirk playing at his lips, and casually mentions that your main competitor has offered them significantly better terms. Something in his tone, that hint of condescension, triggers a surge of anger and defensiveness. Before you can stop yourself, you snap back with a cutting remark about their company's recent public failures. The temperature in the room drops instantly. Within minutes, months of relationship building crumbles, and the deal evaporates. The true cost of that 5-second reactive response? Millions in lost revenue, countless opportunities vanished, and a reputation damage that will echo through your industry for years. But here's what's even more sobering. This scenario plays out every day in boardrooms, offices, and meetings across the world, though usually with less dramatic price tags attached. Your brain's reaction system is a remarkable piece of evolutionary engineering. When faced with a threat, it floods your body with stress hormones, narrows your focus, and prepares you for immediate action, all within milliseconds. This lightning-fast response helped your ancestors survive predator encounters. But in today's complex social and professional landscape, it's like having a hair-trigger security system that goes off at the slightest movement. Recent neuroscience research reveals that when you're in a reactive state, blood flow actually decreases to your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for strategic thinking, emotional regulation, and complex decision-making. Instead, your ancient limbic system takes control, reducing your mental capacity to that of a threatened animal. In other words, at the exact moment you need your highest reasoning abilities, your brain shifts into its most primitive gear. Consider how this plays out in Satya Nadella's transformation of Microsoft's culture. When he took over as CEO in 2014, Microsoft was known for its aggressive, competitive internal culture, where reactive leadership was the norm. Meetings often devolved into defensive posturing and sharp exchanges, creating an environment where innovation stagnated and talent fled. Nadella recognized that this reactive culture was Microsoft's biggest liability. He began by modeling a different approach, one built on thoughtful response rather than immediate reaction. In one notable instance, during a heated executive meeting where two division leaders were locked in a territorial dispute, Nadella did something unexpected. Instead of jumping in with an immediate solution or taking sides, he paused. He asked both leaders to step back and consider how their proposed solutions aligned with Microsoft's broader mission of empowering every person and organization on the planet. This simple act of creating space between stimulus and response shifted the entire dynamic. The conversation transformed from a reactive power struggle into a strategic discussion about customer value. This approach, replicated countless times across the organization, played a crucial role in Microsoft's remarkable resurgence, with its stock price increasing over 400% during Nadella's first 5 years as CEO. But you don't need to be a CEO to see how reactive patterns silently sabotage success. Take Alex, a brilliant software developer whose technical skills were unmatched in his team. Despite his expertise, he remained stuck at the same level for years while watching less talented colleagues advance. The reason? His reactive communication style. Whenever his code received criticism during reviews, Alex would immediately launch into a defensive explanation, or, worse, point out flaws in his colleagues' work. His technical arguments were often valid, but his reactive delivery created tension and resistance. Team members began avoiding giving him feedback, and his reputation for being difficult overshadowed his technical brilliance. The turning point came when Alex's manager gave him frank feedback about how his reactive communication style was holding him back. Instead of reacting defensively as usual, Alex forced himself to pause. In that moment of pause, he realized how his pattern of immediate reaction was sabotaging his career goals. Alex developed a simple strategy. Whenever he received code review comments, he would wait at least an hour before responding. This cooling-off period allowed him to separate the emotional trigger from his technical response. Within 6 months, team dynamics shifted dramatically. His colleagues began seeking his input more frequently, and his reputation transformed from difficult genius to trusted senior developer. 3 months later, he received the promotion that had eluded him for years. These stories highlight a crucial truth. Your reactive patterns aren't your fault, but they are your responsibility. Your brain's threat response system will continue to fire automatically. That's its job. But you can develop the ability to pause before acting on these impulses, creating space for wiser choices. The journey to mastering your reactive patterns begins with awareness. Tonight, take 5 minutes before bed to reflect on your day's 3 most costly reactive moments. Don't judge or analyze. Simply observe and note them down. What triggered you? What was your immediate reaction? What would you do differently with the benefit of hindsight? This simple evening reflection isn't about self-criticism. It's about developing the awareness that will become your foundation for change. As you begin to recognize your reactive patterns, you'll naturally start creating tiny spaces between trigger and response. In these spaces lies your power to choose, and in these choices lies your path to transformation. Your challenge for this week: keep a small notebook by your bed. Each night, write down 3 situations where you reacted automatically. Just observe and record. No judgment, no analysis. This simple act of observation will begin to transform your relationship with reactivity, one moment at a time. Chapter 2: Breaking Free from Autopilot. Neuroscience research shows that your brain initiates actions up to 7 seconds before you become consciously aware of your choice. This isn't science fiction. It's the startling reality of how your mind operates. While you might believe you're in conscious control of your reactions, the truth is far more complex and fascinating. Think about the last time you reached for your phone after hearing a notification. Was it a conscious, deliberate choice? Or did your hand move almost automatically, as if pulled by an invisible force? This automatic response is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to understanding how deeply ingrained reactive patterns shape your daily life. Your brain processes an astounding 11 million bits of information every second, yet you're consciously aware of only about 40 bits. This means the vast majority of your responses, from physical movements to emotional reactions, are guided by unconscious neural pathways that form through repeated patterns of behavior. These pathways are like well-worn trails in a forest, and your reactions naturally follow these familiar routes unless you consciously create new ones. This understanding revolutionized Ray Dalio's approach to decision-making at Bridgewater Associates, now the world's largest hedge fund. In the early 1980s, Dalio noticed a troubling pattern. His strongest conviction trades often led to his biggest losses. Despite his intellectual understanding of markets, his emotional reactions were sabotaging his success. Instead of fighting these reactions, Dalio began studying them with scientific curiosity. He documented every trade, not just the numbers, but his emotional state and thought process before each decision. A pattern emerged. His strongest emotional reactions often signaled blind spots in his thinking. This revelation led to the development of what he called radical transparency, a systematic approach to understanding and transcending reactive decision-making. Dalio implemented a practice where every meeting at Bridgewater was recorded and analyzed. The goal wasn't just to capture information, but to study how people's reactive patterns influence their decisions. He discovered that even experienced professionals fell into predictable reactive traps when their ideas were challenged or markets moved against their positions. This observation led to the creation of baseball cards for each employee, not tracking their performance stats, but their typical reaction patterns. By making these patterns visible and discussable, Bridgewater created an environment where people could catch their reactions before they took over. The results were remarkable. Not only did investment performance improve, but the firm developed a unique culture of psychological safety, where people could acknowledge and work with their reactive patterns, rather than being controlled by them. The key insight from Dalio's experience wasn't just about investment decisions. It was about the power of bringing unconscious patterns into conscious awareness. Your brain's automatic reactions aren't the enemy. They're valuable data points about your underlying patterns and beliefs. The real breakthrough comes when you learn to catch these patterns before they take over. This is where the concept of pattern interruption becomes crucial. Your reactive patterns are like a line of falling dominoes, each thought and feeling triggering the next in a rapid cascade. But if you can catch the sequence at any point, you create space for a different response. Maria, an emergency room nurse with 15 years of experience, discovered this truth during one of the most challenging periods of her career. The constant pressure of life and death decisions had created deeply ingrained reactive patterns. When things went wrong, she would tense up, her voice would sharpen, and the entire team's stress levels would escalate. The turning point came during a particularly chaotic shift. A critical patient was crashing, equipment was malfunctioning, and her team was falling into familiar patterns of stressed reactivity. But this time, something was different. Just before snapping at a new nurse who had fumbled an instrument, Maria noticed the tension in her shoulders. This tiny moment of awareness, this pattern interruption, created just enough space for her to take a breath. Instead of reacting with her usual sharp command, she paused for a split second and spoke calmly. "Let's reset. What do we need right now?" That simple pause transformed the entire dynamic of the room. The team's anxiety levels dropped, communication improved, and they stabilized the patient more efficiently than ever. Intrigued by this experience, Maria began studying her reaction patterns more closely. She identified specific triggers, certain types of cases, particular team dynamics, even specific times during her shift when she was more likely to react automatically. She developed a simple technique she called the shoulder check, using physical tension as an early warning system for emotional reactivity. Over the next 6 months, Maria taught this technique to her entire department. The results were remarkable. Patient satisfaction scores improved, team communication became more effective, and most importantly, medical outcomes showed measurable improvement. What started as one nurse's moment of awareness transformed an entire department's approach to high-stress situations. The power of pattern interruption lies in its simplicity. You don't need to understand all your psychological complexities or resolve all your emotional triggers. You just need to catch yourself in that crucial moment before reaction takes over. This is where real choice becomes possible. Your unconscious patterns will continue to fire. That's how your brain is designed to work. But by developing awareness of these patterns, you create the opportunity for different responses. Each time you catch a reactive pattern before it takes over, you're literally rewiring your brain's response pathways. Tomorrow, you'll begin this rewiring process with a simple but powerful challenge. Keep a small notebook with you throughout the day. Your task is to identify your 3 most common reaction triggers, those situations or interactions that reliably push your buttons. But here's the crucial part. Don't try to change these reactions yet. Simply observe them with curiosity, noting, what specifically triggered the reaction? Where in your body did you first feel it? What was your automatic response? This isn't about judgment or change. It's about developing the awareness that precedes transformation. Like a scientist studying a fascinating phenomenon, approach your reactive patterns with genuine curiosity. Each reaction you notice is valuable data, helping you map the territory of your unconscious patterns. Chapter 3. The Control Paradox. Your attempts to control your emotions are making them worse. Every time you try to force yourself to calm down or get over it, you're actually amplifying the very feelings you're trying to suppress. This isn't just theory. It's a neurological fact that has profound implications for your emotional well-being and success. Think of the last time you told yourself to stop being angry or just relax. How did that work out? If you're like most people, the mere act of trying to control the emotion actually intensified it. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The harder you push down, the more forcefully it wants to pop up. The science behind this phenomenon is fascinating. When you attempt to suppress an emotion, you activate 2 competing neural networks simultaneously, one generating the emotion and another trying to inhibit it. This creates a neural tug-of-war that consumes massive amounts of mental energy, while actually strengthening the emotional circuit you're trying to quiet. Research has shown that people who regularly attempt to suppress their emotions experience them more intensely and more frequently than those who don't. Even more striking, brain imaging studies reveal that emotional suppression activates the amygdala, your brain's threat detection center, making you more reactive, not less. Arianna Huffington learned this lesson the hard way. In 2007, 2 years after founding the Huffington Post, she collapsed from exhaustion, hitting her head on her desk and breaking her cheekbone. For years, she had prided herself on her ability to power through stress and emotional fatigue, seeing her capacity to suppress feelings of overwhelm as a strength. "I was proud of my ability to get by on 4 hours of sleep," she later wrote. "I had bought into the delusion that burnout was the necessary price for success." This approach worked, until it didn't. The collapse forced her to confront a painful truth. Her attempts to control and suppress her body's stress signals were creating a pressure cooker of accumulated tension. The wake-up call led Huffington on a journey to understand the true nature of emotional well-being. She discovered that her previous approach, trying to master emotions through force of will, was fundamentally flawed. Instead of fighting against her emotional responses, she began studying them with curiosity. She implemented what she called micro steps, tiny moments throughout the day where she would check in with her emotional state without trying to change it. Rather than pushing away feelings of stress or anxiety, she would acknowledge them. "Oh, there's that tension in my shoulders again. That's interesting." This shift from control to curiosity transformed not only her personal well-being, but her entire approach to business leadership. The Huffington Post began incorporating wellness rooms and meditation spaces into their offices. Nap rooms, once considered corporate heresy, became a standard feature. Most importantly, the company culture shifted from glorifying stress suppression to encouraging emotional awareness. The results were remarkable. Employee satisfaction increased, turnover decreased, and the company's growth accelerated. By working with rather than against emotional responses, Huffington had discovered a more sustainable and ultimately more successful way of operating. This brings us to the revolutionary concept of emotional surfing. Instead of trying to control your emotions like an authoritarian dictator, you learn to ride them like a skilled surfer rides waves. A surfer doesn't try to control the ocean. That would be futile. Instead, they develop the skill to work with the water's natural movement. The same principle applies to your emotional landscape. Each emotion is like a wave. It will rise, peak, and eventually dissipate on its own if you don't interfere with the process. Your job isn't to control the wave, but to develop the balance and skill to ride it. This approach requires a fundamental shift in how you relate to your emotions. Instead of seeing them as problems to be solved or enemies to be conquered, you begin to recognize them as valuable signals carrying important information about your internal and external environment. James, a software engineering manager and father of 2 young children, discovered this truth through his struggles with anger. For years, he prided himself on his ability to keep it together at work, maintaining a facade of calm control even in the most stressful situations. But at home, the accumulated tension would erupt in bursts of anger over minor incidents. The breaking point came when he snapped at his 6-year-old daughter for spilling juice on the carpet. The look of fear in her eyes shattered his illusion of having his emotions under control. That evening, he found himself Googling anger management techniques, adding to his arsenal of suppression strategies. But something different happened when he encountered the concept of emotional surfing. Instead of trying to eliminate his anger, he began paying attention to how it manifested in his body. He noticed that anger always started as a tightness in his chest, before moving to his shoulders and jaw. The next time he felt that familiar tightness beginning, instead of immediately trying to suppress it, he got curious. He noticed how the sensation moved through his body, almost like a wave of energy. Rather than fighting it, he allowed himself to feel it fully, while maintaining awareness of his breathing. To his surprise, the anger peaked and passed much more quickly when he stopped trying to control it. More importantly, by staying present with the emotion instead of suppressing it, he began to recognize earlier warning signs of building tension. This awareness allowed him to take preventive steps, like brief walking breaks or deep breathing, before the emotional wave became overwhelming. Over 6 months, James's relationships at home and work transformed. His colleagues noticed that he became more approachable during crises. His children no longer walked on eggshells around him. Most surprisingly, his actual experience of anger decreased significantly. Not because he was controlling it better, but because he had stopped fighting it. The key insight from James's experience is that emotions become problematic not because of their intensity, but because of our resistance to them. The more you fight against an emotional response, the more energy you invest in it, and the stronger it becomes. This brings us to a practical exercise that will fundamentally shift your relationship with emotional reactions. For the next 24 hours, approach your emotions like a curious scientist observing an interesting phenomenon. When you notice an emotional response arising, take 3 slow breaths, keeping your attention on the physical sensations in your body. Notice where in your body you feel the emotion most strongly. Instead of trying to change or control the feeling, simply observe how it moves and changes on its own. Give yourself permission to feel the emotion fully while maintaining awareness of your breath as an anchor. This isn't about achieving any particular state or outcome. It's about developing a new relationship with your emotional experience, one based on awareness and acceptance rather than control and suppression. Each emotion becomes an opportunity to practice this new approach, building your capacity for emotional resilience one wave at a time. Chapter 4. Mapping your emotional landscape. Did you know that you make over 35,000 decisions every single day? Even more staggering, your emotional state shifts several hundred times within those 24 hours. Yet research shows that you're unaware of roughly 90% of these emotional fluctuations and the decisions they influence. This isn't just a fascinating statistic. It's a wake-up call about how much of your life operates on autopilot. Think of your emotional life as a vast, uncharted territory. Like ancient cartographers facing an unexplored continent, you can't navigate effectively without first creating an accurate map. Your emotional landscape contains hidden triggers, reactive patterns, and habitual responses that shape your decisions and behaviors in ways you've never noticed. Understanding this territory isn't just about self-awareness. It's about power. Every uncharted emotional pattern is a potential source of unconscious reactions that can derail your best intentions. But once mapped, these same patterns become opportunities for transformation. The neuroscience behind this is compelling. Your brain processes emotional information through multiple parallel pathways, many of which operate below conscious awareness. These pathways create emotional responses before your conscious mind even registers what's happening. This is why you might find yourself snapping at a loved one or stress eating before you've even realized you're upset. Tennis champion Novak Djokovic's journey provides a powerful illustration of emotional mapping in action. Despite his extraordinary talent, Djokovic struggled with inconsistent performance early in his career. He would dominate one match only to inexplicably collapse in the next, particularly during high-stakes situations. The turning point came in 2010, when he began working with a performance specialist, who introduced him to the concept of emotional mapping. Together, they started tracking not just his physical performance, but his emotional states throughout matches, practices, and daily life. What they discovered was revealing. Djokovic's performance issues weren't primarily technical or physical. They were emotional patterns he had never noticed. For instance, they identified that his energy would dip significantly after winning a tough first set, making him vulnerable in the second. He also had specific triggers around crowd noise that would disrupt his focus without him realizing it. Most importantly, they discovered that his breathing patterns changed dramatically during certain types of points, particularly when serving under pressure. This unconscious shift in breathing was triggering a cascade of physiological responses that affected his performance. Armed with this emotional map, Djokovic implemented specific strategies to address each pattern. He developed pre-serve routines that maintained consistent breathing, created energy management techniques between sets, and established mental anchors to stay centered regardless of crowd dynamics. The results were transformative. Between 2011 and 2016, Djokovic dominated men's tennis in a way few players ever have, winning 11 Grand Slam titles. More importantly, he developed a level of emotional mastery that allowed him to maintain peak performance under the most intense pressure. Understanding my emotional patterns changed everything, Djokovic later shared. It wasn't about controlling emotions. It was about becoming aware of them. Once you can see the pattern, you can choose how to respond. Your emotional patterns may not play out on center court at Wimbledon, but they're just as crucial to your success and well-being. Every day, these hidden patterns influence your decisions, relationships, and performance in ways you've never realized. Observe Bradley's story. As the owner of a popular restaurant, he prided himself on maintaining high standards and running a tight ship. But his business was plagued by high staff turnover and inconsistent customer service. Despite his best efforts to fix these issues through better training and stricter policies, the problems persisted. Everything changed when Bradley began mapping his emotional patterns throughout the day. He started simple, using a note-taking app on his phone to track his predominant emotion each hour. Within a week, a clear pattern emerged. His stress levels peaked predictably during the lunch rush. No surprise there. But what he hadn't noticed was how this stress would linger, affecting his interactions with staff for hours afterward. He'd become increasingly critical and short-tempered as the day progressed, creating a tense atmosphere that impacted both employee performance and customer experience. The most revealing insight came when he noticed that his stress response intensified significantly on delivery days. The uncertainty around timing and quality of deliveries was triggering an anxiety response that colored his entire management style on those days. Armed with this emotional map, Bradley implemented specific strategies. He scheduled his most important staff interactions outside of high-stress periods. He created a buffer zone after the lunch rush, 15 minutes of quiet time in his office to reset. Most importantly, he restructured delivery procedures to reduce uncertainty, spreading deliveries across different days, and implementing a more robust tracking system. Within 3 months, the restaurant's atmosphere transformed. Staff turnover dropped by 60%, and customer satisfaction scores improved dramatically. By understanding and adapting to his emotional patterns, Bradley had created a more stable and positive environment for everyone. Your emotional map will be unique to you, but creating it follows a similar process. For the next 7 days, you're going to conduct what performance psychologists call an emotional audit. This isn't about changing anything yet. It's purely about observation and awareness. Chapter 5. The Hidden Wisdom of Your Triggers. Your strongest triggers aren't your enemies. They're your most honest friends. This statement might seem absurd, especially when you're in the grip of an intense emotional reaction. After all, how can something that makes your heart race, your muscles tense, and your thoughts spiral be considered friendly? Yet within each trigger lies a profound message about your deepest needs, values, and untapped potential. Think of triggers as sophisticated alarm systems. When something triggers you emotionally, it's not random chaos, it's precise intelligence. Your nervous system has detected something that threatens what matters most to you. The stronger the trigger, the more important the underlying value or unmet need. This perspective transforms triggers from obstacles into opportunities. Instead of viewing them as weaknesses to overcome, you can approach them as signposts pointing toward your most important growth edges. Every trigger carries a message, and learning to decode these messages is like gaining access to your own personal growth manual. When you're triggered, your amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, isn't just firing randomly. It's drawing on your entire life history, comparing current situations against past experiences where something important was threatened or compromised. This means your triggers are actually sophisticated pattern recognition systems, highlighting areas where you need healing, growth, or boundary setting. Jack Ma's journey with Alibaba provides a masterclass in transforming triggers into triumph. Before becoming one of the world's most successful entrepreneurs, Ma faced rejection after rejection. He applied to Harvard 10 times and was rejected each time. He was turned down for 30 different jobs, including one at KFC, where 24 people applied and he was the only one rejected. Most telling was his extreme triggered response to these rejections. Each no would send him into a spiral of self-doubt and anger that could last for days. Rather than just being disappointing, these rejections triggered something much deeper. They activated intense feelings of inadequacy and shame. Instead of trying to suppress these reactions or toughen up, Ma began studying his trigger patterns. He noticed that his strongest reactions came not from the rejections themselves, but from moments when he felt his intelligence or potential was being underestimated. This wasn't just about job applications. It was about a deeper need to prove his worth and challenge conventional measures of success. I started to see that my triggers were actually showing me what I cared about most, Ma later shared. They weren't telling me to give up. They were showing me exactly what I needed to fight for. This realization led to a profound shift. Instead of trying to fit into existing systems that triggered him, Ma began building something entirely new. His sensitivity to being underestimated became fuel for creating opportunities for others who didn't fit traditional molds. Alibaba's early mission, to empower small businesses that traditional banks and companies overlooked, emerged directly from Ma's transformed relationship with his triggers. The trigger that once sparked shame became the foundation of a revolution in Chinese e-commerce. By 2014, Alibaba had grown into one of the world's largest e-commerce companies, facilitating billions of dollars in transactions and helping millions of small businesses succeed. This same principle applies to your triggers, whether they surface in your career, relationships, or daily interactions. Each emotional hotspot contains valuable data about what matters most to you and where you need to focus your growth energy. Consider how this plays out in Lucia's story. As a recently divorced mother of two, Lucia found herself intensely triggered by interactions with her ex-husband. Even simple text messages about scheduling would send her into hours of emotional turmoil. Small delays in picking up the kids would trigger disproportionate anger and anxiety. Initially, Lucia tried to suppress these reactions, believing they showed she hadn't moved on properly. But through working with a counselor, she began approaching her triggers differently. Instead of fighting them, she started getting curious about their messages. Using a simple journaling practice, Lucia started tracking her strongest triggers and exploring the deeper needs beneath them. A pattern emerged. Her most intense reactions came not from her ex-husband's actions themselves, but from moments when she felt powerless or when her role as a mother seemed threatened. This insight was transformative. The triggers weren't telling her to control her ex-husband's behavior. They were highlighting her need to build inner security and establish clear boundaries. She realized her excessive reactions to schedule changes weren't really about punctuality. They reflected a deeper need for predictability and control during a time of massive transition. Armed with this understanding, Lucia began responding differently. Instead of fighting for control over her ex-husband's actions, she focused on building structures that gave her more personal agency. She created buffer times in her schedule, developed independent backup plans for childcare, and started setting clearer boundaries about communication. Most importantly, she learned to welcome her triggers as informative rather than threatening. When strong emotions arose, she would ask herself, "What is this trigger trying to tell me about what I need?" This simple shift transformed her co-parenting relationship and accelerated her personal growth. Your triggers carry similarly valuable messages. Each emotional flare-up is an opportunity to understand yourself more deeply and identify areas ripe for growth. The key is learning to decode these messages instead of just reacting to them. Here's your challenge for the next 3 days. Create a trigger translation journal. Each time you experience a strong emotional trigger, take 5 minutes to explore these 3 aspects. The situation. What specifically happened? Be objective and detailed. The reaction. What emotions, physical sensations, and thoughts arose? The message. What might this trigger be telling you about your needs, values, or areas for growth? Choose one trigger per day to analyze this way. Don't try to change anything yet. Simply observe and explore with curiosity. Like a scientist studying an interesting phenomenon, maintain an attitude of fascination rather than judgment. Remember, your triggers are trying to tell you something important. Are you ready to start listening? Chapter 6. Breaking the Reaction Cycle. The monitor's steady beep suddenly turns erratic. Your hands are deep inside the patient's chest cavity when the unexpected complication strikes. Blood pressure dropping, oxygen saturation plummeting. The operating room erupts in controlled chaos as alarms blare their urgent warning. Every fiber of your being screams to act, to do something, anything, but you force yourself to pause. In this critical moment, your next move will determine whether this patient lives or dies. This isn't just any surgery. This is your first solo cardiac procedure since becoming an attending surgeon. Your reputation, career, and most importantly, a human life hang in the balance. The familiar surge of adrenaline floods your system. Heart racing, pupils dilating, muscles tensing. But instead of surrendering to the automatic fight-or-flight response, you take one deliberate breath. In that microscopic pause between stimulus and response, clarity emerges. You notice the subtle abnormality in the heart's rhythm that others have missed. This insight, possible only in that fraction of a second when you broke the reaction cycle, leads to a precise intervention that stabilizes the patient. What could have been a catastrophic outcome transforms into a textbook save. This scenario, shared by a veteran cardiac surgeon, illustrates a universal truth. The quality of our lives often hinges on our ability to break the reaction cycle in crucial moments. Whether you're in an operating room, boardroom, or living room, the same four-stage pattern governs every emotional reaction: trigger, escalation, action, and impact. Understanding these stages isn't just academic. It's the key to transforming your response to life's challenges. Each stage represents both a potential pitfall and an opportunity for intervention. The magic lies in recognizing where you are in the cycle and knowing how to interrupt it effectively. Indra Nooyi's handling of the 2006 PepsiCo crisis provides a masterclass in breaking the reaction cycle. When false rumors about product contamination threatened to destroy billions in market value, every instinct pushed toward an immediate defensive response. The trigger was clear: unfair accusations threatening the company she led. The escalation was rapid, plummeting stock prices and panicked board members demanding immediate action. Instead of succumbing to the pressure for knee-jerk damage control, Nooyi did something remarkable. She broke the reaction cycle at the escalation stage. In that moment of crisis, she later shared, I realized that rushing to react would only feed the frenzy. We needed to respond, not react. Rather than issuing defensive statements or launching aggressive counter-campaigns, she initiated a methodical investigation while maintaining transparent communication with stakeholders. This measured approach not only resolved the immediate crisis, but strengthened public trust in PepsiCo's commitment to consumer safety. The hardest part wasn't deciding what to do, Nooyi explained. It was resisting the overwhelming urge to do something immediately. Breaking that automatic reaction pattern required immense discipline, but it made all the difference. The 4 stages of the reaction cycle became her framework for crisis management. Trigger: identifying the true nature of the threat beyond its emotional charge. Escalation: consciously slowing the emotional buildup through systematic analysis. Action: choosing strategic response over automatic reaction. Impact: measuring and adjusting based on outcomes rather than immediate relief. This framework transformed not just how she handled crises, but how PepsiCo approached challenges at every level. By teaching her executive team to recognize and interrupt their reaction cycles, she created a culture of thoughtful response that drove the company's success for years to come. The same principles that worked in PepsiCo's boardroom can transform your daily challenges. Breaking the reaction cycle isn't about suppressing normal emotional responses. It's about inserting strategic pauses that allow for better choices. David, a high school physics teacher in an underperforming district, discovered this truth through necessity. His first year teaching was a constant battle with reactive behavior, both his students and his own. Every disruption triggered an immediate disciplinary response, creating a cycle of escalating tensions that made effective teaching impossible. "I was caught in a reaction loop," David recalled. "Student acts out, I react with punishment. They react with more defiance, I react with stricter punishment. Nobody was learning anything except how to make each other miserable." The turning point came when David started studying his own reaction patterns. He noticed that his most challenging class was right after lunch, when his energy was low and his patience shorter. By identifying this pattern, he could prepare for potential triggers instead of being blindsided by them. He began experimenting with breaking the reaction cycle at different stages. When a student would act out, trigger, instead of immediately escalating with a reprimand, he would pause and take a deep breath. This tiny intervention prevented the automatic escalation stage, giving him space to choose a more effective response. "The most powerful discovery was that by breaking my reaction cycle, I helped students break theirs," David explained. "When I responded to disruption with curiosity instead of anger, it changed the whole dynamic. Students started catching themselves mid-reaction too." Within one semester, David's classroom transformed from a battleground into a learning community. Test scores improved, but more importantly, students developed crucial emotional regulation skills that served them far beyond physics class. The key to breaking your own reaction cycle lies in recognizing your personal patterns and implementing strategic interruptions at each stage. At the trigger stage, practice immediate awareness. Notice the physical sensations that signal an emotional reaction is beginning. This awareness creates a crucial split-second pause before escalation begins. During escalation, use pattern interruption techniques. Change your physical state through movement, breathing, or shifting position. This breaks the momentum of emotional buildup. At the action stage, implement the 3 R's: recognize, retreat, respond. Recognize you're about to react. Retreat momentarily if possible, then choose a conscious response. Finally, in the impact stage, analyze outcomes objectively. What worked? What didn't? Use this information to refine your intervention strategies for next time. Your challenge for the next 3 days is to become a scientist of your own reaction cycle. Choose one triggering situation you frequently encounter, perhaps a specific person who pushes your buttons or a recurring stressful scenario. Each time it occurs, identify which stage of the reaction cycle you're in and attempt one small intervention. Document what works and what doesn't. Remember, you're not trying to eliminate reactions. You're learning to navigate them skillfully. Every time you break the reaction cycle, you strengthen your capacity for conscious response over automatic reaction. Chapter 7. The Power of the Pause. 1 second of pause would have given me a different life. These words, spoken by James Mitchell from death row, echo through the cold concrete corridors of San Quentin State Prison. In a single moment of rage, he took a life and forever altered his own. That split second between trigger and action, a space so small yet so significant, held the power to change everything. You've experienced these pivotal moments yourself. The heated argument where one wrong word escalated into a relationship-ending fight. The impulsive email reply that damaged a professional relationship. The snap judgment that led to a missed opportunity. Each instance represents a crucial moment where a fraction of a second could have changed everything. What makes the pause so powerful? It's the space where possibility lives, the gap between what happens to you and how you choose to respond. This isn't just philosophical musing. It's hardwired into your neurobiology. Research reveals that your brain begins preparing for action up to 7 seconds before you consciously make a decision. This means you have a wider window for intervention than you might think. Nelson Mandela's 27 years in prison provide perhaps the most profound demonstration of the power of the pause in human history. During his imprisonment on Robben Island, he faced daily provocations designed to break his spirit. Guards would taunt him, deny him basic necessities, and attempt to provoke violent reactions that would justify harsh treatment. One incident particularly illustrates Mandela's mastery of the pause. A young guard, notorious for his cruelty, one day threw Mandela's food into the dirt and spat on it. Every fiber of Mandela's being urged immediate retaliation. The other prisoners watched, expecting, perhaps hoping, to see their leader stand up to this blatant disrespect. Instead, Mandela paused. In that space between provocation and response, he saw something others missed, the guard's own fear and conditioning. Rather than reacting with anger, Mandela calmly asked the guard about his family, his background, his dreams. This unexpected response created a crack in the guard's hostile facade. Over months, through consistently choosing response over reaction, Mandela transformed this relationship. The guard eventually became one of his strongest advocates within the prison system, secretly carrying messages to the ANC and helping improve conditions for other prisoners. "It was not my natural response," Mandela later wrote. "It was a conscious choice, made possible only by creating space between stimulus and response." The pause space operates like a muscle. It strengthens with deliberate practice. Start with situations where the stakes are low, but the triggers are real. When your phone buzzes with a notification, pause before reaching for it. When someone cuts you off in traffic, pause before honking. Each tiny victory expands your capacity for bigger challenges. Let's talk about Diana Lucas, one of the FBI's top crisis negotiators. Her ability to maintain composure in high-stakes situations has saved countless lives, but this skill didn't come naturally. Early in her career, she struggled with reactive responses that sometimes escalated volatile situations. "I learned that the quality of my pause determined the quality of my outcome," Diana explains. "In hostage situations, every word carries life or death weight. The pause isn't just about holding back. It's about creating space for optimal response." One case particularly tested Diana's pause practice. A desperate father had taken his children hostage after losing a custody battle. Initial responders had tried reasoning, threats, and emotional appeals, all met with escalating aggression. When Diana arrived on scene, she did something unexpected. She paused. Instead of immediately engaging, she spent several minutes in silence, listening to the father's breathing patterns through the negotiation line. This pause allowed her to tune into subtle cues others had missed. The slight tremor in his voice that revealed fear beneath the anger. The pattern of his responses that suggested he was most volatile after mentions of his ex-wife. "In that pause, I heard what he wasn't saying," Diana recalls. "Every negotiator before me had rushed to solve the situation. By pausing, I gave him space to feel heard." This approach led to a peaceful resolution, with the father voluntarily surrendering after a 4-hour negotiation. Diana's method for expanding the pause space translates directly to daily life physical anchoring. When triggered, immediately focus on physical sensation, feet on the ground, breath in the body. This breaks the mental spiral and creates natural pause. Curiosity bridge. Use the pause to shift from reaction to investigation. What's beneath the trigger? What's driving the other person's behavior? Response. Crafting. Only after completing the first 2 steps, consciously choose your response based on desired outcome rather than emotional urgency. The power of the pause lies not in its duration, but in its quality. Even a fraction of a second, used consciously, can alter the trajectory of a situation. This isn't about suppressing natural reactions. It's about creating space for chosen responses. Your challenge for the next week is deceptively simple. Take 3 conscious breaths before responding in any situation that triggers an emotional reaction. Not 1 breath, not 2. Specifically 3. This precise number matters because it creates enough space to break reactive patterns while remaining practical in real-world situations. Count them silently. Inhale 1, exhale 1, inhale 2. Exhale 2, inhale 3, exhale 3, then respond. This isn't just an exercise in breathing. It's your first step in mastering the space between stimulus and response, where your true power lies. Chapter 8. The Silent Revolution. You've already learned 3 crucial lessons since opening this chapter, and I haven't written a word yet. Take a moment to notice what just happened in your mind. Did you start searching for these phantom lessons? Did you feel a slight tension, an urge to figure it out? Most importantly, did you notice how this silence created space for your own thinking? In our noise-filled world, silence has become a forgotten superpower. Every notification demands a response. Every message expects an immediate reply. Every confrontation seems to require a swift defense. But what if your most powerful response isn't a response at all? Think about your most recent emotional trigger. Perhaps a cutting comment from a colleague or a passive-aggressive text from a family member. Your instinct likely pushed you to respond immediately, to fill the uncomfortable void with words. This instinct, while natural, often robs you of your greatest power: strategic silence. The science behind silence reveals something remarkable. Research shows that moments of silence activate different neural pathways than verbal responses, engaging regions associated with deeper processing and emotional regulation. When you choose not to respond immediately, you're not just staying quiet, you're activating a more sophisticated level of mental processing. Steve Jobs, known for his revolutionary products, was equally revolutionary in his use of strategic silence. During crucial negotiations or product presentations, Jobs would often employ what became known as his devastating silence. After making a point or receiving a challenge, he would simply wait. No defense, no elaboration, no nervous filling of space. One particularly powerful example occurred during the development of the first iPhone. In a crucial meeting with cellular carriers, Jobs laid out his unprecedented demands for control over the iPhone's features and user experience. When met with immediate pushback, instead of arguing or compromising, he remained silent. The silence stretched for an uncomfortably long time, nearly 2 minutes by some accounts. This vacuum created such tension that the carriers began negotiating with themselves, eventually offering more favorable terms than Jobs had initially requested. But Jobs' use of silence wasn't limited to high-stakes negotiations. During product development meetings, he would often respond to presentations with extended silence, creating space for deeper reflection rather than immediate judgment. This practice became so well known that Apple teams would prepare not just for his questions, but for his silence, often discovering flaws in their own proposals during these quiet moments. The power of silence isn't about creating discomfort or playing mind games. It's about creating space for deeper understanding and more intentional response. This requires developing what psychologists call silence tolerance, the ability to stay comfortable in moments of non-response. To build this capacity, start with low-stakes situations. When someone makes a statement that would typically trigger an immediate response, practice taking 3 silent breaths before speaking. Notice how this tiny gap changes the quality of your response. As your silence tolerance grows, gradually extend these gaps in appropriate situations. Examine the transformation of Ryan, a customer service manager at a major telecommunications company. His team handled hundreds of escalated complaints daily, and their standard approach was to respond immediately with solutions or explanations. Despite their quick responses, customer satisfaction remained low, and team burnout was high. Through a management training program, Ryan learned about the power of strategic silence. He began implementing what he called mindful gaps in customer interactions, brief moments of silence after customers expressed their frustrations. Instead of jumping to solutions, his team learned to create space through silence. The results were unexpected. Not only did customer satisfaction scores improve dramatically, but resolution times actually decreased. When asked about the change, customers repeatedly mentioned feeling truly heard for the first time. The silence allowed them to fully express their concerns, and often led them to discover solutions themselves. The hardest part was training myself to be comfortable with silence, Ryan explains. Every instinct screamed to fill the gap, to offer immediate solutions. But I discovered that silence often does the heavy lifting for you. It gives people space to move from reaction to reflection. Ryan's team developed a simple but effective protocol. After a customer expresses frustration, take one full breath of silence. After receiving important information, pause for 2 breaths before responding. When encountering high emotion, extend the silence until the customer naturally pauses. This practice transformed not just customer interactions, but team dynamics as well. Team members reported feeling less stressed and more effective, as the strategic use of silence gave them time to process and respond thoughtfully rather than reactively. Chapter 9. The Curious Observer. Have you ever noticed how a great mystery novel pulls you in? That irresistible urge to turn the page, to understand what happens next, to piece together the clues? This same curiosity, the drive that keeps you reading until 3 a.m. to solve the case, holds the key to transforming your relationship with emotions. Most people treat difficult emotions like enemies to be defeated or problems to be solved. But what if you approach them like a master detective approaching a complex case? What if every emotional trigger became a fascinating clue rather than a threat? When you think about it, your emotional landscape is the most compelling mystery you'll ever investigate. Each reaction contains hidden patterns, each trigger holds secret evidence, and every emotional response offers a trail of clues leading to deeper understanding. The power of curiosity and emotional mastery finds its roots in groundbreaking research, which demonstrates that approaching emotions with genuine interest actually changes their neural signature in the brain. When you shift from resistance to curiosity, you activate different neural pathways, moving from the threat response system to regions associated with learning and discovery. Jane Goodall's revolutionary work with chimpanzees provides a masterclass in the power of curious observation. When she first arrived at Gombe in 1960, the prevailing scientific method was to interact directly with the chimps, often trying to elicit specific behaviors. Instead, Goodall chose a radical approach. She simply watched with genuine fascination. For months she sat quietly, observing their behaviors without judgment or interference. Her field notes didn't label behaviors as good or bad. She simply documented what she saw with precise, curious attention. This approach led to groundbreaking discoveries about chimpanzee behavior that had eluded more interventionist researchers. The parallels to emotional mastery are striking. Goodall's success came not from trying to change or control the chimp's behavior, but from developing what she called patient curiosity. When she discovered chimps using tools, a finding that revolutionized our understanding of primates, it wasn't through active investigation, but through careful, interested observation. I had to learn to quiet my own preconceptions, Goodall later wrote. The moment I thought I knew what I would see, I became blind to what was actually happening. This same principle applies powerfully to our emotional lives. The moment we think we know what an emotion means, or how we should respond, we miss the crucial evidence it's trying to show us. Applying this approach to your emotional life requires developing what psychologists call curious mindfulness, the ability to observe your emotional responses with genuine interest rather than judgment. This isn't about analyzing or fixing. It's about watching with the same fascination you'd bring to an engaging mystery. Start by treating each emotional reaction as a piece of evidence in a larger case. Instead of immediately trying to change or suppress an emotion, approach it with these detectives' tools. When anger arises, notice its physical signature in your body with genuine interest. Where exactly do you feel it? How does it move? What preceded its arrival? When anxiety appears, observe its pattern like a detective tracking footprints. What trail of thoughts led here? What physical sensations accompany it? When sadness emerges, document its characteristics with professional curiosity. What quality does it have? What triggers preceded it? How does it affect your breathing, posture, and energy? This observational approach creates a crucial gap between experiencing an emotion and reacting to it. By becoming curious about your emotional responses, you naturally step out of their grip and into the role of fascinated investigator. Miguel, a professional poker player in Las Vegas, discovered the power of this approach when his emotional tells were costing him crucial games. Traditional advice told him to suppress his reactions, to develop an unreadable poker face. But the more he tried to control his emotions, the more obvious his tells became. Working with a performance coach, Miguel took a radically different approach. Instead of trying to eliminate his emotional responses, he began studying them with genuine curiosity. He started keeping detailed notes about his emotional patterns during games, treating each reaction as valuable data rather than a problem to solve. I became a detective of my own emotional landscape, Miguel explains. Instead of trying to hide my excitement when I got good cards, I got curious about exactly how that excitement manifested. Where did I feel it first? What tiny muscle movements did it trigger? This curious observation led to fascinating discoveries. Miguel realized his tells weren't just random reactions. They followed specific patterns tied to his level of certainty about his hand. By understanding these patterns through observation, rather than trying to suppress them, he gained deeper insight into his own decision-making process. More importantly, this same curiosity allowed him to better read his opponents. When I stopped judging my own emotions so harshly, I became much more attuned to subtle emotional cues in others, he notes. It was like switching from trying to control the game to becoming fascinated by its emotional dynamics. Within 6 months, Miguel's tournament earnings increased significantly, but the real transformation went beyond poker. This approach changed how I handle all emotions, he reflects. Instead of seeing anxiety as something to fight, I get curious about what it's telling me. Instead of trying to shut down anger, I investigate what triggered it. Every emotion becomes an interesting case to solve. Your challenge for the next 24 hours is to become an emotion detective. Choose one specific emotion that typically challenges you: anger, anxiety, sadness, or even excitement. Your mission is to gather evidence about this emotion with professional curiosity. Keep a small notebook handy and document 3 key pieces of evidence each time your chosen emotion appears. Physical evidence. What bodily sensations accompany this emotion? Circumstantial evidence. What situation or trigger preceded it? Pattern evidence. How does this instance compare to previous appearances of the same emotion? Remember, you're not trying to change anything. You're simply gathering clues with professional interest. Like any good detective, maintain an attitude of fascinated neutrality. There are no bad clues, only interesting evidence. Chapter 10. The Body's Hidden Language. Right now, your body is giving you exactly 17 different signals about your emotional state, and you're missing every single one. Your shoulders hold tension from this morning's frustration. Your breathing pattern shifted 3 times while reading that first sentence. Your jaw clenches slightly, perhaps questioning this bold claim. Yet, like most people, you've learned to tune out these physical whispers of emotion until they become screams. Think of your body as the world's most sophisticated early warning system, a complex network of sensors constantly gathering emotional data before your conscious mind catches up. That gut feeling you get about a situation? It's not mystical intuition. It's your body processing thousands of subtle cues faster than your thinking brain can analyze them. The science of interoception, your ability to sense your body's internal state, reveals something remarkable. Your physical response to an emotional trigger begins approximately 240 milliseconds before you're consciously aware of feeling anything. This means your body knows how you feel before you do. Research demonstrates that this bodily awareness isn't just faster than conscious emotional processing, it's also more accurate. When study participants were asked to predict their emotional responses to various scenarios, their physiological measurements, heart rate variability, skin conductance, muscle tension, predicted their actual reactions with 85% accuracy, while their conscious predictions were only 42% accurate. Michael Phelps's journey to becoming the most decorated Olympian of all time offers a masterclass in harnessing this body-emotion connection. Early in his career, Phelps struggled with pre-race anxiety that would manifest in physical tension, particularly in his shoulders and chest. Rather than trying to eliminate these sensations through mental techniques alone, Phelps and his longtime coach Bob Bowman developed what they called physical response training. Before every race, Phelps would perform a detailed body scan, noting every physical sensation without trying to change it. He learned to recognize the subtle difference between performance-enhancing activation and performance-hindering tension. Over time, this practice evolved into his famous pre-race routine, where he would methodically check in with different parts of his body while standing behind the starting block. "I started treating my body like an emotional GPS," Phelps later explained. "Instead of seeing pre-race butterflies as something to fight, I learned to read them like navigation signals, telling me exactly what adjustments I needed to make." This approach proved crucial in the 2008 Beijing Olympics, when his goggles filled with water during the 200-meter butterfly. Because he had trained his body awareness so precisely, he completed the race perfectly, counting his strokes and trusting his body's signals, winning gold and setting a world record despite being effectively blind. The key insight from Phelps's experience isn't just about athletic performance. It's about developing what neuroscientists call interoceptive accuracy, the ability to correctly interpret your body's signals. This skill proves invaluable in every area of life where emotions play a role, from high-stakes negotiations to personal relationships. To develop this capacity, start by understanding that your body communicates in 4 primary channels. Muscle tension patterns reveal emotional states before they reach consciousness. Anxiety often appears first in the shoulders, anger in the jaw, and sadness in the chest. Breathing rhythms shift with emotional states. Quick and shallow with stress, held breath with fear, deep and slow with calm. Digestive signals, that gut feeling, often indicate emotional responses before mental awareness catches up. Temperature changes, particularly in the hands and face, can signal emotional shifts before you consciously register them. Nina, a corporate mediator in Singapore, discovered the power of this body-emotion connection during a particularly challenging merger negotiation. Despite her extensive training in conflict resolution, she often found herself caught off guard by sudden emotional escalations between parties. "I was so focused on reading other people's body language that I completely ignored my own body's warnings," Nina recalls. Working with a somatic coach, she began paying attention to her own physical sensations during negotiations. She noticed a particular tension in her solar plexus that would appear roughly 2 minutes before discussions typically became heated. It was like my body was picking up on subtle signs of escalating tension before anyone started raising their voices, she explains. Nina started using this awareness as an early warning system. When she felt that familiar tension, she would proactively shift the conversation's direction or call for a brief break. Within 3 months, her success rate in difficult negotiations increased by 40%. The most surprising discovery was how this awareness changed my presence in the room, Nina notes. When I started honoring my body's signals, other people seemed to unconsciously pick up on that groundedness. Discussions became calmer, more productive. Your challenge for the next week is to create your personal body-emotion dictionary. Choose 3 specific times each day to perform a quick body scan. Morning, before starting your day. Afternoon, during a typical stress point. Evening, before bed. During each scan, spend exactly 90 seconds noting every physical sensation you can detect. Pay particular attention to muscle tension or relaxation, breathing pattern, temperature variations, facial tension. Don't try to change anything. Simply observe and note these sensations alongside your emotional state at that moment. By day 7, patterns will emerge, revealing your body's unique emotional language. Remember, your body never lies about your emotional state. It's simply waiting for you to learn its language. Chapter 11. Finding Calm in Chaos. Stand in the heart of Times Square. Feel the crush of bodies, the assault of neon lights, the cacophony of car horns and street performers, and countless conversations in dozens of languages. Your senses are overwhelmed. Your nervous system screams for escape. Yet, in this precise moment of sensory overload, you possess the capacity for perfect calm. Not by shutting out the chaos, but by shifting how you relate to it. This isn't theoretical. Your brain already knows how to do this. Every night when you dream, you observe intense experiences without becoming consumed by them. This same capacity for mindful observation exists in your waking life, waiting to be activated. The neuroscience behind this ability is fascinating. When you shift from being immersed in an experience to observing it, your brain activity literally transforms. The amygdala, your emotional alarm system, reduces its activity while the prefrontal cortex, your wisdom center, increases engagement. This creates what neuroscientists call the observer effect, the ability to experience intense emotions while maintaining a calm, clear perspective. Phil Jackson, legendary NBA coach of the Chicago Bulls and Los Angeles Lakers, understood this principle long before neuroscience confirmed it. Known as the Zen Master, Jackson faced a unique challenge when he took over the Bulls in 1989. He had arguably the greatest basketball player of all time in Michael Jordan, but the team couldn't translate individual talent into championship success. Jackson realized the problem wasn't skill. It was emotional reactivity. In high-pressure moments, players would get caught up in their emotions, losing perspective and making costly mistakes. His solution was revolutionary for professional sports at the time: mindfulness training. He introduced the team to meditation practices focused on developing the observer perspective. Players learned to maintain awareness of their emotions without being controlled by them. Jordan, initially skeptical, later credited this training as crucial to his development as a leader. The biggest difference, Jordan explained, was learning to see pressure moments from above, like watching myself in a movie. I could feel the intensity, but wasn't consumed by it. The results were unprecedented: 6 NBA championships in 8 years. Other teams had talented players. Other teams had excellent strategies. But Jackson's Bulls mastered something more fundamental: the ability to maintain perspective in chaos. The observer perspective isn't just for elite athletes. It's a trainable skill that transforms how you handle every emotional challenge in your life. The key lies in understanding that you are not your emotions. You are the awareness that experiences them. Think of your emotional experience as a movie playing on a screen. When you're caught in reactivity, it's like sitting in the front row. The images are overwhelming, all-consuming. The observer's perspective is like walking to the back of the theater. The movie still plays with all its intensity, but you have space to see it clearly. This space allows you to respond rather than react. It transforms emotional triggers from overwhelming experiences into valuable information. The key is developing what psychologists call metacognitive awareness, the ability to observe your thoughts and feelings as they occur. Layla, an air traffic controller at one of Europe's busiest airports, discovered the transformative power of this perspective during a particularly challenging period. Managing dozens of aircraft simultaneously requires intense focus and split-second decisions. Any emotional reactivity can have serious consequences. I used to think being good at my job meant suppressing emotions, Layla explains. If I felt stress or anxiety, I saw it as a failure of control. This actually made the pressure worse because I was fighting my natural responses. Through mindfulness training, Layla learned to maintain the observer perspective during high-stress situations. Rather than trying to eliminate anxiety, she learned to observe it while staying focused on her tasks. Now, when I feel that flutter of anxiety as the traffic increases, I mentally step back and watch it like a weather pattern moving through. I can note anxiety is present without being consumed by it. This gives me the clarity to make better decisions. The results were remarkable. Not only did her performance metrics improve, but her job satisfaction increased dramatically. The stress didn't disappear, she notes, but my relationship with it completely transformed. The observer perspective becomes particularly powerful during emotional triggers. Instead of being hijacked by the initial rush of emotion, you can maintain enough distance to respond intentionally. This doesn't mean suppressing or analyzing your emotions. It means developing the capacity to experience them fully while maintaining perspective. Your challenge for the next 7 days is the neutral observer practice. 3 times each day, set a timer for 2 minutes. During this time, practice observing your current experience as if you're a neutral scientist studying an interesting phenomenon. Notice physical sensations, emotions, and thoughts without trying to change them. If you feel resistance or judgment, observe that too. The goal isn't to feel any particular way. It's to strengthen your capacity to maintain perspective regardless of what you're experiencing. Start with relatively calm moments. As you build confidence, gradually practice during more challenging situations. By day 7, try maintaining the observer perspective during a mild emotional trigger. Remember, the chaos of life won't stop, but your ability to find calm within it is always available, one mindful observation at a time. Chapter 12. The Power of Strategic Pausing. The moment you feel you have absolutely no time to pause is exactly when you need it most. Think about the last time you were racing against a deadline, juggling multiple urgent demands, or facing a crisis that demanded immediate action. Every fiber of your being screamed for immediate response. Yet in these precise moments, a strategic pause could have completely transformed your outcome. This isn't about taking lengthy breaks or stepping away from responsibility. It's about mastering the micro moments that separate exceptional performance from costly mistakes. The paradox of strategic pausing is that it actually accelerates your path to success by preventing the detours of hasty decisions. The science behind strategic pausing reveals something fascinating about peak performance. Under pressure, your brain's default response is to narrow its focus, an evolutionary adaptation that served our ancestors well when facing immediate physical threats. However, in today's complex world, this narrowing often eliminates crucial context and creative solutions. A strategic pause interrupts this automatic narrowing, allowing your brain to access its full problem-solving capacity. Richard Branson's journey with strategic pausing offers a masterclass in this principle. In 1984, Virgin Atlantic faced a critical moment when British Airways launched an aggressive campaign to drive them out of business. Branson's team pushed for immediate retaliatory action, presenting what seemed like logical countermeasures. Instead of jumping into action, Branson did something unexpected. He retreated to his private island for 24 hours of focused contemplation. His team was initially frustrated by what seemed like dangerous hesitation. However, this strategic pause allowed Branson to see beyond the obvious reactive options. During this pause, Branson realized that matching British Airways' aggressive tactics would drain Virgin's resources and potentially damage their brand. Instead, he developed a creative strategy that turned British Airways' aggression against them. Virgin positioned itself as the friendly underdog, fighting corporate bullying, earning massive public support and customer loyalty. This wasn't the only time strategic pausing saved Virgin Group. In 2000, when the dot-com bubble was at its peak, Branson's advisors strongly urged him to invest heavily in various internet ventures. The pressure to act quickly was intense. Opportunities seemed to be disappearing daily. Again, Branson implemented a strategic pause. He spent 3 days reviewing not just the opportunities, but his gut feelings about them. This pause allowed him to recognize patterns of unsustainable growth that others missed in their rush to invest. Virgin Group's conservative approach during this period saved them from the devastating losses many companies suffered when the bubble burst. The ability to step back, Branson later wrote, especially when every instinct screams for immediate action, has saved us from more disasters than any other single business practice. This brings us to the pause method, a systematic approach to strategic pausing in high-stakes situations. Pause. Create physical and mental space by taking 3 deep breaths. Acknowledge. Name the emotions and pressures you're experiencing without judgment. Understand. Assess the broader context and potential implications. Select. Consider multiple options before choosing your response. Engage. Act decisively once you've gained clarity. The power of this method lies in its scalability. It can be compressed into a few seconds for urgent situations or expanded into a longer reflection period for major decisions. Dr. Thomas Brown, a trauma surgeon at a major urban hospital, discovered the transformative power of systematic pausing during his fellowship year. In emergency medicine, the pressure to act immediately is intense, literally life or death. However, Dr. Brown noticed that the most effective senior surgeons somehow created micro-moments of clarity, even in crisis situations. I used to think pausing during an emergency was dangerous, Dr. Brown explains, but I began to realize that the most costly mistakes happened when we rushed without those brief moments of assessment. Dr. Brown implemented what he called pause points, specific moments during procedures where the team would take exactly 3 seconds to assess and align. These pauses were strategically placed before critical decisions or transitions in the surgery. The results were remarkable. Over 6 months, his surgical team saw a 43% reduction in preventable complications. More surprisingly, the total procedure times actually decreased. The brief pauses improved team coordination and reduced the need to correct mistakes. The key was making these pauses systematic rather than random, Dr. Brown notes. By having designated pause points, we maintained the flow while ensuring we never missed crucial details in our rush to act. The pause method became particularly crucial during a challenging trauma case involving multiple injuries. During the procedure, Dr. Brown's team encountered unexpected complications. The standard protocol seemed inadequate for the unique situation they faced. Instead of pushing forward with the usual approach, Dr. Brown called a pause point. In those 3 seconds, each team member focused on what they were observing. This brief pause allowed them to synthesize their observations and develop a modified approach that better suited the patient's specific needs. Those 3 seconds completely changed the course of the surgery, he reflects. Without that pause, we might have missed crucial details that ended up being vital for the patient's recovery. Chapter 13. The Art of Response Design. A master chef doesn't frantically improvise dinner, they design it. Your responses deserve the same craftsmanship. Think about the last time you encountered a triggering situation. Did you improvise your response in the heat of the moment, or did you execute a carefully crafted strategy? The difference between these approaches often determines whether you'll feel proud or regretful of your actions. Most people treat emotional responses like short-order cooking, rushing to produce whatever comes to mind under pressure. But master communicators, like expert chefs, understand that excellence comes from thoughtful preparation and deliberate design. They know that the most powerful responses aren't spontaneous reactions, but carefully crafted expressions that align with their deepest values and intentions. The science of response design reveals something fascinating about human behavior. Your brain processes information and formulates responses through neural pathways that strengthen with repetition. When you leave your responses to chance, you're essentially letting these pathways form randomly, often reinforcing patterns that don't serve your highest goals. However, when you consciously design your responses, you're actively sculpting these neural pathways to support your intended outcomes. David Attenborough's work with dangerous wildlife offers a masterclass in response design. While his documentaries appear effortlessly natural, they're built on meticulously designed response patterns developed over decades of wildlife encounters. In 1979, during filming in Indonesia, Attenborough faced a potentially deadly situation with a Komodo dragon. The massive lizard, typically docile during filming, suddenly became aggressive and charged toward him. Instead of relying on instinct, Attenborough executed a pre-designed response pattern he had developed for predator encounters. His calm, measured movements, neither running nor freezing, diffused the situation and created what became an iconic wildlife moment. Later, he revealed that this wasn't luck or natural talent, but the result of careful response design. Every potential wildlife encounter has a specific protocol, Attenborough explained. We design these responses long before we need them, which allows us to remain composed in moments where instinct might lead us astray. This principle extended beyond dangerous encounters. Attenborough developed designed responses for everything from equipment failures to unexpected animal behaviors. Each potential scenario had a pre-crafted response template that could be adapted to specific situations. This systematic approach transformed potentially chaotic moments into opportunities for exceptional footage and storytelling. The response design framework emerges from this understanding. It's a systematic approach to crafting responses that align with your values and goals. Identify your triggers with precision. Clarify your desired outcome. Design your ideal response template. Practice in low-stakes situations. Refine based on results. This framework isn't about creating rigid scripts. It's about developing flexible response patterns that you can adapt to any situation. Think of it like a jazz musician who masters scales and patterns so thoroughly that they can improvise beautifully within any musical context. Natalie's kindergarten classroom transformation illustrates the power of response design in action. As a first-year teacher, she found herself constantly reacting to classroom disruptions, creating a cycle of escalating chaos. Each day felt like an improvised performance where she was always one step behind the action. Frustrated by this reactive approach, Natalie began studying her classroom dynamics. She identified 5 primary types of disruptive behavior and designed specific response patterns for each. For instance, when students argued over sharing materials, instead of her usual frustrated intervention, she designed a calm, three-step response. First, she would kneel to the student's eye level, creating a sense of connection rather than authority. Then, she would acknowledge both children's desires using a consistent phrase, "I see you both want to create something special." Finally, she would guide them through a simple sharing protocol she had designed. The results were remarkable. Within weeks, her classroom atmosphere transformed. Not only did disruptions decrease, but her students began mimicking her designed responses in their own conflicts. The most surprising thing, Natalie noted, was how this approach actually gave me more spontaneity in my teaching. Because I wasn't constantly putting out fires, I had more energy for creative instruction. But Natalie's most significant breakthrough came during an unexpected parent confrontation. A frustrated father burst into her classroom after school, angry about a seating arrangement. In the past, this type of surprise confrontation would have flustered her. However, because she had designed responses for parent interactions, she smoothly engaged her planned pattern: acknowledge, investigate, collaborate. She began with her designed acknowledgement phrase, "I appreciate you caring so deeply about your child's experience." This simple, practiced response immediately shifted the dynamic. The conversation transformed from confrontational to collaborative, leading to a solution that benefited everyone. Having designed responses doesn't mean you become robotic, Natalie explains. Instead, it gives you a foundation of confidence that actually allows for more authentic connection. Your challenge for this week is the response architecture exercise. Choose 3 challenging situations you frequently encounter, perhaps a critical coworker, a family member's triggering behavior, or a stressful work scenario. For each situation, write down your typical reactive response. Envision your ideal response. Design a simple, flexible response template. Practice your designed response in a low-stakes setting, like role-playing with a friend. Use your designed response in real situations and note the results. Remember, you're not creating rigid scripts, but crafting reliable patterns that you can adapt to any situation. Like a master chef's recipes, your response designs should serve as trusted foundations that free you to respond with both intention and authenticity. Chapter 14. Applied Emotional Intelligence in Action. Your phone buzzes with an urgent work message. Your teenager slams their door after an argument. Your partner makes that comment that always gets under your skin. In the span of mere minutes, life demands intelligent responses to complex emotional situations. How you handle these rapid-fire moments determines the trajectory of your relationships, career, and personal growth. Each day presents countless opportunities to either react unconsciously or respond with emotional intelligence. The difference lies not in avoiding emotional situations, that's impossible, but in developing the practical skills to navigate them effectively. This isn't about theoretical knowledge. It's about applied emotional intelligence in real-world situations. The science of applied emotional intelligence reveals 4 fundamental pillars that transform abstract concepts into practical skills: recognition, regulation, expression, and impact. These pillars form a dynamic system that allows you to navigate emotional situations with precision and purpose. Recognition involves accurately identifying emotions in yourself and others. Regulation focuses on managing emotional intensity without suppression. Expression deals with communicating emotions effectively. Impact considers how your emotional responses influence others and shape outcomes. Sheryl Sandberg's journey through personal tragedy and professional challenges at Facebook demonstrates these pillars in action. Following the sudden death of her husband in 2015, Sandberg found herself navigating both intense personal grief and the demands of leading one of the world's most scrutinized companies. Initially, Sandberg tried to compartmentalize her emotions, believing she needed to maintain a strictly professional facade at work. However, this approach began to crack under the pressure of unprocessed grief and mounting business challenges. The turning point came when she realized that authentic emotional intelligence meant integrating her emotional experience rather than trying to segment it. She developed a systematic approach to emotional recognition, starting each day by acknowledging her emotional state rather than trying to push it aside. This practice of emotional awareness allowed her to regulate her responses more effectively, choosing when to lean into vulnerability and when to maintain professional boundaries. In meetings, Sandberg began explicitly naming emotions, both her own and those she observed in her team. This emotional transparency, far from undermining her leadership, strengthened it. When discussing difficult decisions about content moderation or privacy policies, she would acknowledge the emotional complexity. "I'm feeling frustrated about this situation, and I imagine many of you are too. Let's use that emotion to fuel better solutions." This approach transformed how her team handled challenging situations. By modeling emotionally intelligent responses, Sandberg created a culture where emotions were seen as valuable data points rather than obstacles to overcome. The result was more nuanced decision-making and stronger team cohesion during crisis periods. The practical application of emotional intelligence requires specific tools for different situations. The RICE method, recognize, investigate, choose, express, provides a framework for real-time emotional navigation. Recognition involves quick body scans and emotional check-ins throughout the day. By developing this habit, you create a baseline awareness that helps you catch emotional shifts early. Investigation means getting curious about emotional triggers rather than reacting to them. This pillar transforms potentially reactive moments into opportunities for insight. Choice points emerge when you understand what you're feeling and why. This is where you consciously select your response, rather than defaulting to habitual reactions. Expression focuses on communicating your emotional experience clearly and constructively, whether that means setting boundaries, showing empathy, or advocating for needs. Kevin's story as an emergency dispatch operator illustrates how these principles transform high-stakes emotional situations. After 5 years on the job, Kevin noticed his effectiveness declining. Calls that once energized him now left him emotionally drained. More concerning, he found himself becoming increasingly reactive to callers' panic, sometimes missing crucial information because he couldn't maintain emotional clarity. Rather than accepting this as job burnout, Kevin began studying applied emotional intelligence. He started by mapping his emotional patterns during calls, noting which types of situations triggered stronger reactions. This awareness allowed him to develop specific strategies for different scenarios. For highly emotional callers, Kevin created a response template that began with matching their energy briefly to establish connection, then gradually guiding them toward a calmer state through his own measured responses. For aggressive callers, he developed a mental checklist to help him remain centered: physical grounding, conscious breathing, and focusing on the practical information needed. The most significant breakthrough came when Kevin realized that his emotional state directly influenced callers' ability to provide accurate information. He began practicing what he called emotional leadership, using his own emotional regulation to help callers regulate themselves. "One night I got a call from a mother whose child had stopped breathing," Kevin recalls. "Instead of getting caught up in her panic, I used my voice to create a calm space. I acknowledged her fear while maintaining steady confidence in my tone. This allowed her to focus enough to perform CPR successfully until paramedics arrived." Kevin's application of emotional intelligence didn't just improve his job performance, it transformed his understanding of emotions' role in crisis communication. He developed a training program for other dispatchers, teaching them to use emotional intelligence as a practical tool rather than seeing emotions as obstacles to overcome. The key to developing applied emotional intelligence lies in consistent practice and tracking. The EQ implementation log provides a structured way to build these skills. Throughout your day, note emotional situations and your responses. For each instance, record the trigger situation, your initial emotional reaction, the response you chose, the outcome of your response, any insights or lessons learned. This isn't about judging your responses as good or bad. It's about building awareness and identifying patterns. Each entry becomes a data point for understanding your emotional patterns and refining your responses. Your challenge this week is to maintain an EQ implementation log for 7 days. Focus on recording at least 3 emotional situations each day, noting how you applied the 4 pillars of emotional intelligence. Pay special attention to situations where you chose a different response than your habitual reaction. What made the difference? How did the outcome change? Remember, applied emotional intelligence isn't about perfection. It's about progress through conscious practice. Each situation becomes an opportunity to refine your emotional skills and build more effective response patterns. Chapter 15. The Art of Response Timing. My greatest mistake cost me my marriage, not because of what I said, but when I said it. This universal truth about timing resonates across every crucial conversation, negotiation, and relationship moment in your life. The right words at the wrong time become the wrong words. The perfect response delivered at an imperfect moment can destroy rather than heal. Think about your own experience. How many times has a well-intentioned message fallen flat or even backfired simply because the timing wasn't right? That important feedback you gave your team member right before a crucial presentation. The relationship conversation you initiated when your partner was overwhelmed with work. The apology you rushed before the other person was ready to hear it. Timing isn't just about clock management. It's about emotional readiness, contextual awareness, and strategic patience. In the heat of emotional moments, your instinct screams for immediate response. But mastery lies in understanding when to speak, when to wait, and when silence itself is the most powerful response. The psychology of timing reveals fascinating patterns in human receptivity to different types of messages. Research in chronobiology and cognitive science shows that our emotional and mental states follow predictable cycles throughout the day, directly impacting our ability to process and respond to emotional information. These natural rhythms create windows of opportunity, moments when the same message lands with maximum impact or minimal resistance. Howard Schultz's transformation of Starbucks during the 2008 financial crisis provides a masterclass in strategic timing. When Schultz returned as CEO in January 2008, Starbucks was facing unprecedented challenges. Store traffic was declining, the stock price had plummeted, and employee morale was at an all-time low. The company needed radical changes, but Schultz understood that timing these changes would be as crucial as the changes themselves. Instead of announcing all changes at once, Schultz orchestrated a carefully timed sequence of initiatives. He began with symbolic actions that acknowledged the company's challenges, closing all U.S. stores for 3 hours to retrain baristas in February 2008. This timing was deliberate, after the morning rush but before the afternoon peak, minimizing business impact while maximizing media attention. The next phase of changes was timed to coincide with natural business cycles. Store closures were announced during traditionally slower periods. New initiatives were launched when employee energy typically peaked. Even difficult messages about layoffs were timed to allow maximum support and transition assistance. Perhaps most crucially, Schultz timed his communication strategy to build progressive buy-in. He started with internal communications to build employee trust, followed by supplier partnerships, and only then moved to broad public announcements. This sequential timing created a cascade of support that helped the company weather the crisis and emerge stronger. The strategic timing matrix provides a framework for mastering response timing in your own life. It considers three critical factors: emotional readiness, both yours and others; contextual alignment, the surrounding circumstances; and impact optimization, when your message will land most effectively. For emotional readiness, assess current emotional state of all parties, recent events or stressors affecting receptivity, natural energy and attention cycles. For contextual alignment, consider external pressures or deadlines, competing priorities or distractions, available time and space for proper discussion. For impact optimization, evaluate natural timing windows in daily, weekly rhythms, momentum from related events or conversations, support systems and resources available. Carmen's story as a divorce mediator illustrates these principles in action. After 15 years of mediating high-conflict divorces, Carmen noticed that the timing of discussions had more impact on outcomes than the content of those discussions. "I had two nearly identical cases," Carmen recalls. "Both involved couples with similar issues around asset division and child custody. With the first couple, I followed their urgency to address everything immediately. Despite saying all the right things, every session devolved into conflict. With the second couple, I intentionally structured the timing of discussions based on emotional readiness. We started with low-conflict items during morning sessions when energy was fresh. We tackled financial discussions midweek when both parties were in their professional mindset. The most sensitive topics were reserved for times when both had completed their individual counseling sessions." The results were dramatic. The first case ended in litigation, while the second reached an amicable agreement. Same messages, different timing, radically different outcomes. Carmen developed what she calls timing intuition through deliberate practice. She began tracking natural patterns in client receptivity. She noticed that Monday mornings were terrible for emotional discussions, but ideal for practical planning. Late afternoon sessions needed more breaks and simpler topics. The week after holidays required extra patience and review. More importantly, Carmen learned to read micro-timing cues, subtle signals indicating when to press forward and when to pause. A slight softening in someone's expression might signal readiness for a difficult topic. A shift in posture could indicate the need to temporarily redirect the conversation. This same timing intelligence applies to your daily interactions. The key lies in developing timing awareness through deliberate practice in low-stakes situations. The Timing Mastery Challenge provides a structured way to build this skill. For the next 7 days, choose one type of response to practice timing variation each day. Day 1, appreciation expressions. Day 2, minor requests. Day 3, status updates. Day 4, casual observations. Day 5, offering assistance. Day 6, sharing information. Day 7, light feedback. For each practice response, notice your immediate timing impulse. Consciously choose a different timing. Observe the difference in impact. Document what you learn about optimal timing. Start with low-stakes situations where timing experimentation carries minimal risk. Pay attention to how different timing affects the reception of your message. Notice patterns in when certain types of communication seem to land most effectively. This practice builds timing intelligence naturally, developing an intuitive sense of when to engage and when to wait. Like a skilled surfer reading waves, you'll learn to feel the natural rhythm of human interaction and time your responses for maximum positive impact. Chapter 16. The Power of Non-Reactive Communication. Research consistently shows that 93% of your message's impact comes from how you deliver it, not what you say. This finding, drawn from decades of communication studies, reveals an uncomfortable truth. The brilliant insights you've carefully crafted matter far less than the emotional state from which you deliver them. Your tone, timing, and emotional presence shape how others receive your message and whether they hear it at all. When emotions run high, even the most thoughtfully constructed message can be lost in the static of reactive delivery. Think about the last time you tried to communicate something important while feeling triggered. Perhaps you had valid points, carefully chosen words, and solid reasoning. But if your delivery carried the charge of reactivity, your audience likely heard the emotion rather than the message. The science of message reception reveals fascinating patterns in how our brains process information under emotional conditions. When someone detects emotional reactivity in communication, whether through tone, body language, or subtle vocal cues, their threat response system activates. This neural hijacking makes it nearly impossible for them to fully receive and process the actual content of your message. This explains why the same feedback delivered with different emotional charges can produce radically different results. The words might be identical, but the impact varies dramatically based on the presence or absence of reactive energy in the delivery. Malala Yousafzai's extraordinary ability to communicate without reactive charge, even in the face of extreme opposition, provides a masterclass in non-reactive communication. After surviving an assassination attempt by the Taliban, Malala addressed the United Nations Youth Assembly in 2013. Despite having every reason for emotional reactivity, she delivered her message with remarkable clarity and purposeful calm. "I don't even hate the Talib who shot me," she stated. "Even if there was a gun in my hand and he stands in front of me, I would not shoot him." The power of this message came not just from the words themselves, but from their non-reactive delivery. She spoke from a place of centered conviction rather than emotional reaction, allowing her message to penetrate hearts and minds worldwide. Malala's communication approach demonstrates several key principles of non-reactive delivery: emotional clarity without emotional charge, purposeful pausing to maintain steady delivery, focus on message rather than personal vindication, commitment to impact over emotional release. These elements created a communication style that transformed potential enemies into allies and inspired millions to action. The absence of reactive energy in her delivery allowed her message to reach past defensive barriers and touch something universal in her listeners. The mechanics of non-reactive communication operate through three primary channels: vocal tone, physical presence, and emotional energy. Each channel can either amplify or diminish your message's impact, depending on how you manage it. Your vocal tone carries subtle but powerful signals about your emotional state. Research in vocal psychology shows that listeners unconsciously detect micro-variations in tone that indicate reactive states, even when the speaker believes they're masking their emotions. This explains why trying to sound calm often fails. Your voice reveals what your words attempt to hide. Physical presence encompasses your body language, facial expressions, and spatial relationship with others. These nonverbal elements communicate volumes about your emotional state and often override your verbal message when misaligned. Even subtle tension patterns in your face or body can broadcast reactive energy that undermines your intended communication. Emotional energy, while less tangible, might be the most crucial channel. This is the underlying emotional field you create through your presence and intention. Like radio waves, this energy transmits independently of your words, either supporting or sabotaging your message. Daniel's work as a hostage negotiator provides a compelling illustration of these principles in action. After 15 years of handling high-stakes negotiations, he discovered that his success rate correlated more with his ability to maintain non-reactive communication than with his tactical approach or choice of words. "I remember one situation with a desperate father who had taken his children hostage," Daniel recalls. "He was emotionally volatile and responding reactively to every attempt at communication. My breakthrough came when I realized I needed to change not what I was saying, but how I was delivering it." Daniel began monitoring his own emotional state more carefully than his word choice. He developed a practice of grounding himself before each communication attempt, ensuring his delivery carried no reactive charge that might trigger the father further. I started feeling my feet on the ground, breathing deeply, and consciously releasing any tension in my body before speaking. I made sure my voice came from my center rather than my throat, and I maintained awareness of my emotional state throughout each exchange. The shift was dramatic. The father, who had been escalating with each previous communication, began to settle. He could feel the difference in how I was communicating, even though my basic message hadn't changed much. It gave him permission to step out of his own reactive state. The situation resolved peacefully, with the father later explaining that he finally felt heard when Daniel's communication style shifted, even though the content of the negotiation remained similar. This experience led Daniel to develop what he calls the Clear Channel Protocol for high-stakes communication. Ground. Connect physically with your body and breath. Center. Find your emotional center before speaking. Monitor. Maintain awareness of your reactive triggers. Adjust. Modulate delivery based on impact rather than intention. Reset. Return to center when reactivity arises. He now trains other negotiators in these principles, emphasizing that non-reactive communication is a learnable skill rather than an innate talent. Chapter 17. Mastering Digital Triggers. Go ahead. Check your phone's notification center right now. Count the number of emotional nudges waiting for your reaction. That work email marked urgent. The social media mention that makes your heart race. The unread message from someone you've been avoiding. Each notification represents a potential emotional trigger, a digital tripwire designed to provoke an immediate response. In our hyper-connected world, these digital triggers have become constant companions, creating unprecedented challenges for emotional equilibrium. The average person checks their phone 262 times per day, once every 5.5 minutes. Each check brings a fresh wave of potential triggers, from inflammatory social media posts to passive-aggressive work messages. This constant exposure to digital triggers creates a unique modern challenge, maintaining emotional balance in an environment explicitly designed to provoke reaction. The neuroscience of digital triggers reveals why they're particularly potent. Your brain processes digital social threats in the same regions as physical threats, but with an added complication: the absence of natural de-escalation cues present in face-to-face interaction. Without body language, tone of voice, and physical presence to provide context and modulation, digital triggers often provoke exaggerated emotional responses. Elon Musk's journey with digital reactivity offers a fascinating case study in both the perils and possibilities of managing online triggers. His Twitter presence became notorious for impulsive reactions that significantly impacted Tesla's stock price and his public image. A single reactive tweet in 2018 about taking Tesla private at $420 per share resulted in SEC fines and required him to step down as Tesla's chairman. This crisis point led Musk to develop what he called his digital pause protocol, a systematic approach to managing online triggers. He implemented a mandatory waiting period before responding to provocative content and established a team to review potentially reactive posts before publication. The results were transformative. While still maintaining his distinctive online presence, Musk's digital pause protocol helped prevent reactive posts that could damage his company's or reputation. Tesla's stock volatility decreased significantly during periods when Musk maintained his protocol, demonstrating the tangible business impact of managing digital triggers. The protocol included several key elements: identification of personal digital trigger patterns, mandatory cooling-off periods for emotionally charged topics, Third-party review for high-stakes communications. Regular assessment of emotional state before engaging online. The science of digital triggers reveals 3 key mechanisms that make them particularly challenging to manage. Immediacy. Digital platforms eliminate natural response delays, pushing for instant reaction. Amplification. The public nature of many digital interactions magnifies emotional stakes. Permanence. The knowledge that digital reactions become permanent records increases pressure. Understanding these mechanisms helps explain why digital environments often provoke stronger emotional responses than their real-world counterparts. The same criticism that might roll off your back in person can feel devastating when delivered through a digital medium. Digital trigger management requires a specialized approach because traditional emotional regulation strategies often fall short in online environments. The speed, scale, and permanence of digital interaction create unique challenges that demand specific solutions. Lisa, a social media manager for a major retail brand, discovered this truth through a series of escalating online crises. Her team's reactive responses to negative comments often transformed minor complaints into viral controversies, damaging brand reputation and team morale. I realized we were bringing offline response patterns to online challenges, Lisa explains. It was like trying to use landline etiquette for smartphone communication. The medium had changed, but our approach hadn't evolved. Lisa developed a systematic, non-reactive protocol for her team that transformed their crisis management success rate. The protocol centered on 3 key practices. Trigger tracking, documenting specific types of content that provoked reactive responses. Response templating, creating pre-approved, non-reactive response frameworks. Emotional checking, regular team check-ins about emotional state during crisis management. The results were remarkable. Within 6 months, the team's crisis resolution rate improved by 84%, and negative interaction chains decreased by 71%. More importantly, team stress levels dropped significantly, and job satisfaction scores increased. The biggest breakthrough came when we stopped treating digital triggers as enemies to fight and started seeing them as data points to analyze, Lisa notes. This shift in perspective allowed us to respond strategically rather than reactively. Lisa's experience highlights a crucial principle. Digital trigger management requires both systematic protocols and perspective shifts. The most effective approach combines practical tools with a fundamental reframing of how we view online interactions. The Digital Detox Protocol offers a structured approach to managing your own digital triggers while maintaining effective online engagement. This protocol operates through 3 progressive phases. Phase 1. Digital trigger mapping. Track your emotional responses to different types of digital content. Identify patterns in timing, content, and context of triggered responses. Document the intensity and duration of emotional reactions. Phase 2. Response pattern analysis. Review your typical reaction patterns to digital triggers. Assess the effectiveness and consequences of these responses. Identify opportunities for response optimization. Phase 3. Strategic response design. Develop specific, non-reactive responses for common trigger types. Create cooling-off procedures for high-intensity triggers. Establish personal guidelines for digital engagement. The protocol works by creating space between digital triggers and responses, allowing for more intentional online interaction. This space proves crucial for maintaining emotional equilibrium in digital environments. For the next 7 days, implement the Digital Detox Protocol in your own online life. Day 1. Audit your notification settings and document emotional responses. Day 2. Identify your top 3 digital triggers. Day 3. Design alternative response patterns for each trigger. Day 4. Practice implementation with low-stakes interactions. Day 5. Extend to more challenging digital situations. Day 6. Assess results and adjust strategies. Day 7. Establish long-term protocols for ongoing management. Begin this challenge tomorrow morning by conducting a complete notification audit. Document every alert that triggers an emotional response, no matter how subtle. This awareness forms the foundation for mastering your digital trigger response patterns. Chapter 18. Professional Poise, the career-defining power of non-reaction. The board meeting falls silent. 12 pairs of eyes lock onto you. Your next response will determine your future. The presentation you spent weeks preparing has just been torn apart by a senior executive, questioning not just your analysis, but your fundamental competence. Your heart pounds. Heat rises to your face. In this moment, your career trajectory hangs on one critical choice: how you respond. These pivotal professional moments occur far more often than we realize. Each interaction with a colleague, presentation to leadership, or response to criticism shapes your professional reputation and career path. While technical skills may get you in the door, emotional mastery determines how far you'll rise. Research reveals that 75% of careers are derailed by emotional competency issues rather than technical ability. The difference between advancing and stalling often comes down to a handful of crucial moments where professional poise either shines through or crumbles under pressure. The psychology of professional presence operates through what behavioral scientists call the leadership shadow effect, the phenomenon where a person's emotional state creates a ripple effect throughout their professional environment. When you maintain poise under pressure, you don't just manage your own state, you actively shape the emotional climate around you. Ursula Burns's journey from intern to CEO of Xerox offers a masterclass in the career-defining power of emotional mastery. Growing up in a New York City housing project, Burns faced countless situations that could have triggered reactive responses. Instead, she developed what she called her pause and perspective approach. During a particularly crucial moment early in her career, Burns found herself in a heated discussion with a senior executive who dismissed her engineering recommendations based on dated assumptions. Rather than reacting defensively, she paused, acknowledged his perspective, and then methodically presented evidence that challenged his views. This measured response not only won the argument, but caught the attention of then CEO Paul Allaire, who became her mentor. As Burns climbed through Xerox's ranks, she consistently demonstrated this ability to maintain professional poise during high-stakes situations. During the company's near bankruptcy in 2000, she helped navigate crisis meetings where emotions ran high and jobs hung in the balance. Her capacity to remain composed while delivering difficult messages earned her the respect that would eventually lead to her historic appointment as the first black female CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Burns's approach centered on 3 core practices. Emotional preparation. Before every significant meeting or presentation, she would mentally rehearse potential challenges and plan measured responses. Strategic pausing. When faced with provocative comments or criticism, she would take a deliberate moment to compose both her thoughts and emotional state. Perspective maintenance. She consistently viewed challenging interactions through the lens of long-term career impact, rather than short-term emotional satisfaction. The professional response matrix translates these insights into a practical framework for navigating workplace triggers while maintaining executive presence. This matrix helps you calibrate responses based on both the situation's stakes and your emotional intensity. The matrix operates across 4 key dimensions. Stakes. Assessment. Evaluating the professional impact of the situation. Emotional temperature. Gauging your current emotional state. Response. Timing. Determining optimal moment for response. Delivery calibration. Adjusting communication style for maximum impact. Adrian, a junior trader at a major investment bank, discovered the transformative power of professional poise during the market volatility of 2020. Initially, his reactive responses to market swings and client pressure marked him as talented but unreliable. Each emotional outburst during stressful trades diminished his credibility with both colleagues and superiors. Everything changed when Adrian implemented the professional response matrix. During one particularly volatile trading session, he faced a situation that would have previously triggered an emotional reaction. A major client was demanding immediate action on a rapidly declining position, while simultaneously questioning Adrian's judgment. Instead of his usual defensive reaction, Adrian applied the matrix. Stakes assessment: high, client relationship and significant capital at risk. Emotional temperature: elevated, recognized physical signs of stress. Response timing: immediate acknowledgement needed, but full response could be measured. Delivery calibration: calm, confident, data-driven communication. Adrian acknowledged the client's concerns while maintaining his composed analysis of the market situation. He provided clear reasoning for his recommended course of action without becoming defensive or reactive. This poised response not only saved the trading position but caught the attention of his desk head. That single interaction changed how senior management viewed me, Adrian reflects. They saw someone who could handle pressure with grace. Within 6 months, I was handling our largest accounts. The transformation in Adrian's professional trajectory hinged on his development of what psychologists call emotional differentiation, the ability to separate immediate emotional reactions from professional responses. This skill, when consistently applied, becomes a powerful career accelerator. The executive presence practice provides a structured approach to building this crucial skill. For the next 5 workdays, implement the following protocol. Day 1. Trigger mapping. Document every situation that challenges your professional poise. Note your default reaction pattern. Identify one alternative response for each trigger. Day 2. Response rehearsal. Before each significant interaction, take 60 seconds to envision potential challenges, plan measured responses, set your emotional baseline. Day 3. Pause implementation. Insert a deliberate 3-second pause before responding to any challenging situation. Use this pause to assess both stakes and emotional state. Choose response timing and delivery consciously. Day 4. Feedback collection. Pay attention to how others respond to your enhanced professional poise. Note any shifts in professional dynamics. Document specific instances where maintained poise created positive outcomes. Day 5. Pattern integration. Review your experiences from the week. Identify which techniques proved most effective. Create a personalized poise protocol for future high-stakes situations. Begin this practice tomorrow morning by identifying 3 likely trigger situations you'll face during the day. For each one, write down your typical reactive response and then design a more measured alternative. This preparation sets the foundation for transforming your professional presence through consistent emotional mastery. The development of professional poise isn't about suppressing your authentic self. It's about choosing how you express that authenticity in ways that serve your long-term career objectives. Each moment of maintained composure builds your reputation for reliable leadership under pressure. For the next week, treat every workplace interaction as an opportunity to practice professional poise. Your career trajectory may well depend on how you respond in these moments of truth. Chapter 19. Unshakable: Building Emotional Resilience Through Non-Reaction. Fall 7 times, stand up 8. This ancient Japanese proverb captures a truth that neuroscientists have only recently begun to understand. The remarkable human capacity for resilience isn't just philosophical wisdom, it's hardwired into your brain's potential. Yet this potential remains dormant in many, activated only in those who master the art of non-reactive resilience. Recent breakthroughs in neuroplasticity research have revealed something extraordinary. Your emotional recovery system operates much like a muscle, growing stronger or weaker based on how you use it. Each time you face a setback with non-reactive awareness instead of emotional overwhelm, you're literally rewiring your brain's stress response circuits, building what neuroscientists call stress inoculation pathways. Research has identified specific neural networks that distinguish highly resilient individuals from those who struggle to bounce back. The key difference isn't the absence of stress or emotional pain. It's the presence of robust, non-reactive response patterns that allow the brain to process adversity without becoming overwhelmed by it. Venus Williams's journey with Sjogren's syndrome offers a powerful illustration of how emotional resilience can transcend even physical limitations. When diagnosed with this debilitating autoimmune condition in 2011, Williams faced a challenge that threatened to end her tennis career. The initial emotional impact was devastating. Her body was attacking itself, and her lifelong pursuit of athletic excellence seemed to be slipping away. Rather than reacting with despair or anger, Williams approached her condition with remarkable emotional discipline. She worked with performance psychologists to develop what she called her response reset protocol. This systematic approach to handling both physical and emotional setbacks transformed her relationship with her condition. The biggest challenge wasn't the physical symptoms, Williams revealed in a rare interview. It was maintaining emotional equilibrium when my body wouldn't cooperate with my competitive spirit. She developed a three-part resilience practice. Physical awareness, learning to distinguish between productive and counterproductive stress responses. Emotional spacing, creating deliberate gaps between challenge and response. Recovery rhythm, establishing sustainable patterns of stress and restoration. This approach not only helped Williams continue competing at an elite level, but also revolutionized her overall emotional resilience. She went on to win multiple championships after her diagnosis, demonstrating how non-reactive resilience can overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. The Resilience Building Protocol translates these insights into practical steps for developing your own unshakable core. This protocol operates through three primary channels: adversity processing, training your brain to handle setbacks without emotional amplification; recovery acceleration, developing faster bounce-back capabilities; strength integration, converting challenges into sources of enhanced resilience. The protocol begins with understanding your current resilience baseline. Most people significantly underestimate their resilience capacity because they focus on emotional intensity rather than recovery speed. The key metric isn't how strongly you feel setbacks, it's how quickly and effectively you regain your center. Emotional resilience operates through what psychologists call the stress adaptation curve. Each time you face a challenge with non-reactive awareness, you're not just handling that specific situation, you're expanding your overall capacity for future challenges. This creates a compounding effect where each successfully navigated setback builds your resilience foundation. Ryan, a bankruptcy lawyer in Chicago, discovered the transformative power of systematic resilience building through his work with clients facing financial devastation. Early in his career, he found himself emotionally drained by his clients' trauma, often taking their stress home with him. Everything changed when he began studying emotional resilience and implementing structured, non-reactive practices. He developed what he called his emotional airbag, a set of internal buffers that allowed him to remain present with clients' pain while maintaining his own emotional stability. I realized that true resilience isn't about becoming harder or more detached, Ryan explains. It's about developing greater emotional capacity while maintaining boundaries. His approach centered on three core practices: compassionate distance, maintaining emotional presence without absorption; recovery rituals, Systematic practices for releasing accumulated stress. Growth integration, converting challenging experiences into expanded capabilities. Ryan's transformation wasn't just professional, it revolutionized his entire approach to life's setbacks. When he faced his own financial crisis during the 2008 recession, he found himself equipped with unprecedented emotional resources for handling adversity. "The skills I developed helping others through financial trauma became my lifeline," he reflects. "I discovered that resilience isn't about avoiding falls. It's about mastering the art of getting back up." The science of resilience has identified 4 key components of emotional recovery. Recognition, accurately assessing the impact of setbacks. Regulation, managing emotional intensity during challenges. Restoration, implementing effective recovery practices. Reinforcement, converting experiences into enhanced capabilities. The Resilience Growth Journal provides a structured approach to developing these components through daily practice. This tool helps you track both challenges and responses, creating a clear picture of your resilience development over time. For the next 7 days, maintain your Resilience Growth Journal using the following format. Challenge documentation. Record each significant setback or obstacle. Initial response. Note your immediate emotional reaction. Recovery process. Document the steps you took to regain balance. Integration. Insights. Identify lessons and growth opportunities. This practice isn't just about recording experiences. It's about actively building your resilience through conscious reflection and adaptation. Each entry becomes a building block in your emotional resilience foundation. Start your journal tonight by reflecting on today's most significant challenge. Document not just what happened, but how you responded and what you learned. This simple practice begins the process of transforming setbacks into stepping stones for growth. Remember, true resilience isn't measured by how many times you fall, but by how many times you rise. Your journey to unshakable emotional strength begins with this first conscious step toward non-reactive resilience. Chapter 20. The Heart of Connection. Mastering Non-Reactive Relationships. Your heart races as you hear those triggering words from someone you love. But this time, something is different. Instead of the familiar surge of defensive energy pushing you to respond immediately, you notice a new space opening up inside. In this moment of pause, you're discovering what relationship experts have long understood. The quality of your connections depends less on what others say or do, and more on your capacity to remain present without reaction. Modern neuroscience has revealed something fascinating about human relationships. Our nervous systems are literally designed to sync with each other, a phenomenon scientists call emotional co-regulation. When you react emotionally, you're not just expressing feelings. You're broadcasting a neural signal that directly impacts the brain chemistry of those around you. This understanding revolutionizes how we approach relationship dynamics. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to either amplify emotional turbulence or cultivate deeper connection through non-reactive presence. The key lies not in controlling or suppressing emotions, but in developing the capacity to hold emotional space while maintaining inner stability. Oprah Winfrey's remarkable interviewing career offers a masterclass in the transformative power of non-reactive presence. While many attribute her success to asking the right questions, the real magic lies in how she listens. Through decades of interviews, Winfrey developed what she calls heart-centered presence, the ability to remain fully engaged without becoming emotionally entangled. During her historic 2013 interview with Lance Armstrong, Winfrey demonstrated this skill at its highest level. As Armstrong finally confessed to years of doping and deception, the atmosphere was charged with tension, shame, and potential defensiveness. Instead of reacting with judgment or trying to extract dramatic moments, Winfrey maintained a steady, non-reactive presence that created space for truth to emerge. The most powerful moments in any conversation come not from what we say, but from what we allow to be said, Winfrey later reflected. When you learn to hold space without reaction, people tell you things they've never told anyone else. Her approach centered on 3 core practices: emotional anchoring, maintaining inner stability, regardless of external triggers; presence, without judgment, creating safe space for authentic expression; responsive, rather than reactive, choosing conscious responses over automatic reactions. These principles transformed not just her interviews, but all her relationships, professional and personal. The same skills that drew unprecedented candor from celebrities proved equally powerful in navigating complex personal relationships and building deep, lasting connections. The non-reactive relationship protocol translates these insights into practical steps for transforming your own relationships. This approach works through 3 primary channels: connection cultivation, building deeper bonds through emotional presence; trigger transformation, converting reactive moments into opportunities for growth; pattern evolution, replacing old relationship dynamics with conscious connection. The protocol begins with understanding your current relationship patterns. Most people focus on changing others' behavior rather than developing their own non-reactive capacity. The key shift comes from recognizing that relationship quality improves dramatically when even one person learns to break the reactive cycle. Maya, a family therapist in Boston, witnessed this transformation while working with 3 generations of the Rodriguez family. The grandmother's criticism of parenting choices triggered defensive reactions in her daughter, creating a cascade of emotional reactions that impacted the grandchildren. Traditional therapy focusing on communication techniques had failed to break this pattern. Everything changed when Maya introduced non-reactive practices to the family system. Starting with the middle generation, she taught what she called emotional buffering, the ability to receive triggering comments without immediate reaction. The practice centered on 3 key skills: physical grounding, using body awareness to stay centered during triggers; emotional spacing, creating deliberate pauses before responding; pattern recognition, understanding generational trigger cycles. The results were remarkable. As the daughter learned to meet her mother's criticism with non-reactive presence, the entire family dynamic began to shift. The grandmother, no longer meeting defensive energy, gradually softened her approach. The grandchildren, witnessing this new model of emotional regulation, began showing greater emotional stability themselves. The most powerful moment came when my daughter criticized my cooking, just like I used to criticize hers, the grandmother shared. Instead of defending myself, I remembered our work on non-reaction. That pause changed everything. We ended up laughing together in the kitchen. The relationship resonance practice provides a structured approach to implementing these principles in your own relationships. This daily practice helps you track both triggers and responses, creating a clear picture of your relationship patterns and opportunities for transformation. For the next 7 days, maintain awareness of your relationship dynamics using these focus points. Morning intention. Set a specific intention for non-reactive presence in one key relationship. Trigger tracking. Notice what specific words, tones, or situations activate your reactive patterns. Response reflection. Document how you handle triggering moments and what you learn from each interaction. This isn't just about observation. It's about actively building your capacity for non-reactive presence in relationships. Each interaction becomes an opportunity to strengthen your emotional stability while deepening connection. Begin tonight by choosing one important relationship for tomorrow's practice. Set a clear intention for how you want to show up in that connection, focusing on maintaining presence rather than changing the other person's behavior. Remember, the deepest bonds aren't built on perfect words or actions, but on the quality of presence we bring to each moment. Your journey to transformed relationships begins with this first conscious step toward non-reactive connection. Chapter 21. The Silent Power of Non-Reactive Leadership. The single trait that distinguishes exceptional leaders isn't vision, charisma, or expertise. It's their capacity to not react. This finding, emerging from a comprehensive study of global leadership effectiveness across 47 countries, challenges everything we thought we knew about what makes great leaders. While most leadership development focuses on what leaders should do, the data reveals something far more fundamental. It's what great leaders don't do. Specifically, their ability to maintain composure rather than react, that sets them apart. When a leader reacts emotionally, it creates a cascade effect throughout their organization. Research in organizational psychology shows that a leader's emotional state can influence team performance by up to 30%, even when the leader isn't directly involved in the work. This phenomenon, known as emotional contagion, means that your reactions as a leader ripple through your entire sphere of influence, shaping everything from team creativity to bottom-line results. The neuroscience behind this is fascinating. When leaders maintain emotional equilibrium, their presence actually helps regulate their team's nervous systems. Brain imaging studies show that exposure to a non-reactive leader increases activity in areas associated with rational thinking and creative problem-solving in team members' brains, while exposure to reactive leadership activates threat responses and diminishes cognitive capacity. Angela Merkel's leadership during the European financial crisis provides a masterclass in non-reactive leadership. As Greece teetered on the edge of economic collapse in 2015, creating potential devastation for the entire Eurozone, Merkel faced intense pressure from all sides. Southern European leaders demanded immediate bailouts, while her own constituents strongly opposed using German resources to rescue what they saw as fiscally irresponsible neighbors. Rather than reacting to the escalating tensions, Merkel maintained what German media dubbed her strategic calm. During one particularly heated summit, when the Greek Prime Minister accused Germany of trying to humiliate Greece, Merkel's response demonstrated the essence of non-reactive leadership. Instead of defending or counterattacking, she simply stated, "We have a responsibility to find a solution that works for all of Europe." Her composed approach had three key elements: emotional steadiness, maintaining consistent composure regardless of external pressure; strategic patience, allowing solutions to emerge rather than forcing immediate responses; inclusive focus, keeping attention on collective benefit rather than personal vindication. This non-reactive stance enabled her to navigate the crisis while keeping key stakeholders engaged in the solution process. The resulting agreement, while not perfect, prevented economic collapse and kept the Eurozone intact. The non-reactive leadership framework translates these principles into practical leadership behaviors through three core practices: presence, cultivation, developing the capacity to remain fully present during challenges; response, choice, making conscious decisions rather than automatic reactions; impact awareness, understanding how your emotional state influences others. This framework revolutionizes traditional leadership development by focusing on the internal capacity for non-reaction rather than external leadership behaviors. The key insight is that leadership presence emerges naturally when you master emotional non-reactivity. Diego, founder of a rapidly growing software company, discovered this truth during his company's most challenging period. As the startup scaled from 10 to 100 employees in 18 months, growing pains threatened to tear the organization apart. Technical delays, customer complaints, and team conflicts created constant pressure for immediate reaction. Initially, Diego's reactive leadership style amplified these challenges. His visible frustration during setbacks spread anxiety throughout the team, leading to defensive behavior and decreased innovation. The turning point came when a mentor introduced him to non-reactive leadership practices. Diego began implementing 3 key changes. Morning centering, starting each day with a brief meditation to ground his leadership presence. Trigger awareness, identifying specific situations that prompted reactive leadership. Response spacing, creating deliberate pauses before responding to challenges. The transformation was remarkable. Within 3 months, team members reported feeling more psychologically safe to take risks and raise concerns. Innovation increased as people felt comfortable sharing early-stage ideas without fear of reactive criticism. Most importantly, the company culture shifted from crisis-driven reactivity to solution-focused collaboration. The most powerful moment came during a major system outage, Diego shared. Instead of reacting with my usual urgency and stress, I maintained a calm presence. The team, missing my typical reactive energy, stepped up with unprecedented ownership and creativity. They solved the problem faster than ever before. This experience illustrates a crucial truth about non-reactive leadership. Your capacity to not react creates space for others to step into their full potential. When you resist the urge to immediately fill emotional space with reactions, you allow leadership to emerge organically throughout your organization. The leadership presence practice provides a structured approach to developing non-reactive leadership capacity. This daily practice helps you track both your reactive triggers and your progress in maintaining leadership presence. For the next 7 days, maintain awareness of your leadership presence using these focus areas. Morning intention. Set a specific intention for non-reactive leadership in one key area. Trigger tracking. Notice what situations activate your reactive leadership patterns. Impact observation. Document how your emotional state influences team dynamics. This isn't just about observation. It's about actively building your capacity for non-reactive leadership. Each interaction becomes an opportunity to strengthen your leadership presence while cultivating a more empowered team environment. Begin tomorrow by choosing one leadership situation where you typically react. Set a clear intention for how you want to show up in that situation, focusing on maintaining presence rather than controlling outcomes. Remember, your greatest impact as a leader often comes not from what you do, but from your capacity to maintain presence without reaction. Your journey to transformed leadership begins with this first conscious step toward non-reactive presence. Tonight's challenge: identify 3 specific leadership situations where you typically react emotionally. For each situation, write 1 sentence about how you want to show up differently through non-reactive leadership presence. This simple exercise begins rewiring your leadership patterns immediately. Chapter 22. The Ripple Effect of Non-Reaction. Imagine dropping a single pebble into perfectly still water. Watch as the ripples expand outward in perfect concentric circles, each wave touching points further from the center, creating patterns that extend far beyond the initial impact. Now consider this remarkable finding from network science. Your emotional responses influence an average of 1,247 people each year through direct and indirect social connections. This isn't just poetry or metaphor, it's mathematical reality. The science behind this emotional ripple effect is fascinating. Research in social network dynamics shows that emotional states can spread up to 3 degrees of separation from their source. This means your non-reactive response to a challenging situation influences not only the people directly involved, but also their friends and their friends' friends. A single moment of practiced non-reaction can create waves of positive impact that reach people you'll never meet. This revelation transforms the stakes of personal emotional mastery. Your commitment to non-reactive presence isn't just about personal growth. It's about contributing to the emotional ecosystem of your entire community. Every time you choose a thoughtful response over an automatic reaction, you're initiating a cascade of positive influence that mathematically touches over 1,000 lives. The Dalai Lama's response to Chinese opposition provides a powerful illustration of how non-reactive presence can create global ripples of transformation. During a particularly tense period of Chinese-Tibetan relations, when inflammatory statements from Chinese officials were making international headlines, reporters gathered expecting an equally charged response from the Dalai Lama. Instead, they witnessed something extraordinary. With characteristic warmth and presence, he responded, "In my mind, I see the Chinese people as my brothers and sisters. Their anger toward me does not change this fundamental truth." This simple statement, delivered without a trace of reactivity, shifted the entire tone of the international conversation. Journalists who came expecting conflict left contemplating compassion. The ripple effect was remarkable. Chinese citizens who heard his response began sharing their own stories of connection with Tibetan culture. International mediators adopted his language of kinship in diplomatic discussions. Local community leaders started implementing non-reactive approaches to cultural conflicts. A new generation of peace activists modeled their approach on his example of maintaining compassionate presence in the face of opposition. This cascade of influence demonstrates how one person's commitment to non-reactive presence can transform conversations at every level, from personal interactions to global dialogue. The science of emotional contagion reveals 3 key principles that make non-reactive presence so powerful. Emotional resonance. Our brains are wired to mirror the emotional states of others, particularly those we respect or spend time with. Network amplification. Positive emotional changes strengthen connections between people, creating self-reinforcing cycles of improvement. Cultural evolution. When enough individuals maintain non-reactive presence, it creates a tipping point that transforms group dynamics. Understanding these principles allows you to consciously harness the ripple effect through the conscious impact framework. This approach helps you maximize the positive influence of your non-reactive presence through 3 key practices. Center point awareness, maintaining clear recognition of your role as an initiator of emotional ripples. Wave pattern observation, noticing how your emotional choices influence the responses and behaviors of others. Ripple reinforcement, consciously supporting positive changes as they move through your social network. Sophia, principal of an urban middle school struggling with behavioral issues and low morale, discovered the transformative power of these principles firsthand. Rather than implementing new disciplinary policies, she decided to focus on transforming the school's emotional ecosystem through non-reactive presence. The change began in her own office. When confronted with angry parents, disruptive students, or frustrated teachers, Sophia practiced maintaining calm, compassionate presence rather than matching their emotional intensity. She replaced reactive discipline with curious listening and thoughtful response. The initial results seemed small. A chronically disruptive student, expecting punishment, opened up about family struggles when met with calm curiosity. A hostile parent, braced for confrontation, relaxed and became collaborative when encountered with steady presence. A burned-out teacher found new enthusiasm after experiencing supported rather than criticized. But like ripples in water, these small changes began expanding outward. First wave. Teachers began modeling non-reactive responses in their classrooms. Students started using pause practices before conflicts escalated. Parents reported calmer interactions at home. Second wave. Other schools in the district noticed and began requesting guidance. Family dynamics started shifting as students brought new skills home. Community organizations adopted similar approaches in youth programs. Third wave. District-wide policies evolved to emphasize emotional intelligence. Local businesses reported improved interactions with young customers. Community conflict rates showed measurable decline. Within 2 years, the school's transformation had influenced the entire community's emotional climate. Test scores improved, behavioral incidents plummeted, and the school became a model for cultural change through emotional intelligence. The most powerful realization, Sophia reflected, was understanding that by changing how I responded to challenges, I was changing the water everyone was swimming in. Every non-reactive moment created ripples of possibility. This insight reveals the true power of non-reactive presence. It doesn't just solve immediate problems, it transforms the emotional environment in which future challenges arise. Your commitment to thoughtful response over automatic reaction literally changes the social atmosphere around you. The Ripple Tracking Journal provides a practical way to observe and enhance your positive influence. Each day, document 3 elements. Central choices. Record specific moments where you chose non-reactive presence over automatic reaction. Immediate effects. Note the direct impact of your choice on the situation and people involved. Expanding influence. Track how these effects spread to others over time. This practice builds awareness of your role in the emotional ecosystem while reinforcing your commitment to conscious response. As you observe the expanding impact of your choices, you'll find increasing motivation to maintain non-reactive presence in challenging moments. For the next 7 days, maintain your Ripple Tracking Journal with particular attention to situations where your non-reactive presence notably influenced others, unexpected positive outcomes that emerged from your thoughtful responses, signs of your influence spreading beyond immediate interactions. Remember, your commitment to non-reactive presence isn't just about personal growth. It's about contributing to the transformation of your entire social ecosystem. Every thoughtful response creates ripples of positive change that reach far beyond what you can see. Tonight's challenge. Before sleep, take 5 minutes to write down one situation today where you maintained a non-reactive presence. Note the immediate effect on others and imagine how this positive influence might spread through your social network tomorrow. This simple reflection begins training your awareness of your role in the emotional ecosystem. Chapter 23: The Mathematics of Lasting Change. Change equals new skills times time divided by old patterns. This simple equation holds the key to why some transformations stick while others fade. You might have experienced this yourself. Moments of profound insight or powerful motivation that seem to promise lasting change, only to find yourself sliding back into old patterns weeks or months later. The mathematics of transformation reveal why this happens and, more importantly, how to prevent it. Think of emotional mastery like building muscle. You wouldn't expect to maintain strength without consistent training, yet we often approach emotional transformation as if a single breakthrough should last forever. The neuroscience of lasting change tells a different story, one where sustainable transformation follows precise mathematical principles. The equation breaks down into 3 critical components that determine the success of any change effort. New skills represent the practical techniques and awareness you've developed through your journey. Time reflects not just duration, but the consistency and quality of practice. Old patterns are the deeply grooved neural pathways that automatically drive reactive behavior. Recent breakthroughs in neuroplasticity research reveal that lasting transformation requires a specific ratio between these elements. When new skills and dedicated practice time exceed the pull of old patterns by a factor of 3 to 1, sustainable change becomes virtually inevitable. Below this threshold, even the most powerful insights tend to fade. Tony Robbins' journey from reactive motivational speaker to master of sustained emotional transformation perfectly illustrates these principles in action. Early in his career, Robbins could electrify audiences with passionate speeches that sparked immediate change, but he noticed a troubling pattern. Many participants would return to his seminars multiple times, having lost their initial transformations. This observation, led Robbins to completely revolutionize his approach. He discovered that emotional intensity alone couldn't overcome ingrained patterns. Initial research into neuroscience revealed the crucial role of consistent practice. He began tracking participant outcomes mathematically, measuring the relationship between practice time and sustained change. This data led to the development of his Hour of Power morning routine, specifically designed to maintain transformation. The breakthrough came when Robbins started treating emotional mastery like athletic training, developing systematic practice methods that worked with the brain's natural learning processes. His most successful clients weren't those who experienced the biggest breakthroughs. They were those who maintained the smallest consistent practices over time. This understanding revolutionized his entire teaching methodology. Programs shifted from intense weekend experiences to sustained practice systems. Follow-up support focused on daily micro-practices rather than major interventions. Success rates for lasting transformation increased from 23% to over 70%. The mathematical relationship between practice time and sustained change became predictable. The implications of this research transform how we approach emotional mastery. Your brain requires specific conditions to rewire reactive patterns into responsive choices. Understanding these conditions allows you to work with your neural architecture rather than against it. The science reveals 3 critical factors for sustainable transformation. Consistency trumps intensity. Regular small practices create more lasting change than occasional major efforts. Integration beats isolation. New skills must be woven into existing daily routines, rather than treated as separate activities. Measurement enables mastery. Tracking specific metrics creates the feedback loop necessary for optimization. Michael's story powerfully demonstrates how these principles translate into real-world transformation. As a recovering addict with a history of explosive emotional reactions, Michael initially approached emotional management the same way he had approached getting clean, through sheer willpower and intensity. The results were predictable. Periods of perfect control followed by devastating relapses into reactive patterns. Everything changed when he started applying the mathematics of transformation. He began tracking his emotional reactions in a simple journal. Each day was scored based on specific observable behaviors rather than feelings. Small wins were celebrated and analyzed for repeatable patterns. Setbacks were treated as data points rather than failures. The systematic approach revealed surprising patterns. Reactions were strongest between 3 and 4 p.m. when blood sugar dropped. Certain physical positions increased emotional control. Specific words or phrases consistently triggered reactions. Small environmental changes could prevent major emotional episodes. Armed with this data, Michael developed a sustainable practice system. Regular meal timing to stabilize blood sugar. Micro-movement practices for physical regulation. Environmental engineering to reduce triggers. Progressive exposure training for building tolerance. The transformation was remarkable. Reactive episodes decreased by 84% over 6 months. Recovery time from triggers shortened from hours to minutes. Other addicts began requesting his sponsorship. His approach was adopted by several recovery programs. But the most powerful change wasn't in the numbers. It was in Michael's relationship with the process itself. By understanding transformation as a mathematical equation rather than a test of willpower, he shifted from fighting his nature to working with it. The Sustainability Blueprint provides a systematic way to apply these principles in your own life. This practical tool helps you design a personalized system for maintaining emotional mastery practices over the long term. Tonight's challenge. Create your initial sustainability blueprint by answering these 3 questions. What is one small practice you can absolutely commit to doing daily, no matter what? What existing routine could you attach this practice to? How will you track and measure your consistency? Keep your answers simple and achievable. Remember, you're building a foundation for lasting change, not attempting an overnight transformation. The mathematics of change work in your favor when you focus on small, consistent steps rather than dramatic leaps. Chapter 24. The Ultimate Freedom. Imagine attending your own retirement party decades from now. The room buzzes with familiar faces, colleagues, family, friends who've shared your journey. As they take turns sharing stories about your impact, a pattern emerges. They're not just recounting your achievements. They're describing how your presence changed them. When everyone else would react, you remained steady, one says. Your calm helped me find mine, adds another. You taught me how to respond instead of react, a third reflects. What would change if you mastered your emotional responses starting today? How many lives would shift course because they encountered your steady presence instead of reactive energy? The ripples of transformation that begin with your next choice extend far beyond this moment, touching countless futures you'll never directly see. The journey to emotional mastery isn't just about personal peace. It's about the legacy you leave in the lives you touch. Every moment you choose response over reaction creates a tiny shift in the universe of possibilities around you. These micro-choices compound over time, eventually determining not just who you become, but who others become through their interaction with you. Maya Angelou's extraordinary journey illustrates this profound truth. Born into trauma and silenced by early abuse, she could have remained trapped in reactive patterns of pain and protection. Instead, she embarked on a lifelong journey of transforming reactive suffering into non-reactive wisdom. Her transformation unfolded through distinct phases. Initial years of reactive silence, where trauma controlled her responses. Gradual awakening to the power of chosen response through writing. Developing a practice of studied calm in face of prejudice and pain. Mastering the art of turning personal suffering into universal healing, teaching others to find their voice without losing their center. The turning point came when Angelou realized that her reactive patterns weren't protecting her. They were perpetuating her past trauma. This insight led to a revolutionary shift in her approach. Instead of fighting painful emotions, she learned to sit with them. Rather than reacting to prejudice, she chose to respond with dignity. When triggered by memories, she transformed them into poetry. Where others sought revenge, she practiced radical forgiveness. This non-reactive presence became the foundation of her most powerful work. Her autobiography, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, emerged not from reactive anger about her past, but from a deep, non-reactive exploration of human experience. Her poem, Still I Rise, demonstrates the perfect balance of emotional truth without reactive energy. The impact of her emotional mastery extended far beyond her writing. Her calm presence during civil rights conflicts helped prevent violence. Her measured responses to critics transformed opponents into allies. Her ability to discuss trauma without reactivity helped others heal. Her example showed how personal pain could become universal wisdom. The Freedom Framework provides a practical path to achieving similar mastery in your own life. Unlike rigid control systems, this framework focuses on developing flexible strength through three key dimensions. Awareness freedom, the ability to observe emotions without being consumed by them. Response freedom, the power to choose actions aligned with your values regardless of triggers. Impact freedom, the capacity to influence others through presence rather than pressure. Wei's story powerfully demonstrates how this framework transforms even the most challenging environments. As a palliative care nurse, she faced death and grief daily, a context that would trigger intense emotional reactions in most people. Initially, she coped by emotional detachment, but this left both her and her patients feeling disconnected. Everything changed when she discovered emotional mastery. Instead of shutting down around death, she learned to remain fully present. Rather than reacting to family members' grief, she held space for their process. When faced with difficult deaths, she transformed fear into compassionate presence. Where others burned out, she found sustainable strength. The transformation in her work was remarkable. Patients reported feeling truly seen and supported. Families found peace even in the hardest moments. Colleagues began seeking her guidance in difficult cases. The entire ward's atmosphere shifted toward greater peace. Way's approach centered on 3 key practices: morning centering to prepare for emotional challenges, micropauses between patients to reset her presence, evening reflection to release accumulated emotion. The impact extended far beyond her immediate work. Families reported easier grief processes. Colleagues adopted her practices. The hospital implemented her methods and training. Her approach influenced palliative care standards. This brings us to your own journey toward ultimate freedom. The Legacy of Liberation exercise helps you craft a clear vision of mastery and map concrete steps to achieve it. This isn't about imagining a perfect future. It's about building a bridge from your current practice to growing freedom. Take out your journal and reflect on these questions. What would total emotional freedom look like in your life? How would others experience you differently? What specific situations would transform through your mastery? Then map the 3 most immediate steps you can take toward that vision. Remember, you're not just building your own freedom. You're creating a legacy of liberation that will echo through countless lives you touch. The journey to emotional mastery is the journey to ultimate freedom. Not freedom from emotions, but freedom to choose your response in every moment. Not escape from challenges, but liberation to face them with steady presence. Not isolation from impact, but freedom to influence with intention. Your next choice is the first step of that journey. What will you choose? Conclusion. You've come so far from where you started. This isn't just about managing emotions anymore. It's about mastering the very essence of how you move through life. You've learned to craft responses with intention, building a repertoire of strategies that serve you in any situation. Let's acknowledge something important. Maintaining these practices isn't always easy. There will be days when old reactive patterns resurface, when stress overwhelms your best intentions, or when you forget to pause before responding. This is not failure. It's part of the process of progressive mastery. Each challenge becomes an opportunity to deepen your practice, to refine your skills, and to grow stronger in your commitment to conscious response over automatic reaction. The ripple effects of your transformation are already touching lives around you, often in ways you can't see. Every time you choose response over reaction, you create a tiny shift in the emotional ecosystem of your relationships. The tools and practices you've learned form a foundation for lifelong growth. Each chapter has equipped you with specific strategies that build upon each other, creating a comprehensive approach to emotional mastery. The real journey begins now, as you close this audiobook and step into your life with new awareness and capability. Every trigger becomes an invitation to practice. Every challenge offers an opportunity to demonstrate mastery. Every interaction presents a chance to create a positive impact through conscious response. Your transformation matters more than you know. In a world increasingly driven by reactive energy, your commitment to conscious response creates a beacon of possibility for others. Your example shows that there is another way, that we can choose how we respond, that we can break free from reactive patterns, that we can create positive change through intentional presence. Remember, mastery isn't about perfection. It's about progressive improvement through consistent practice. Each time you pause before reacting, craft a conscious response, or help someone else find their calm center. You strengthen not just your own mastery, but the collective capacity for conscious response. The journey continues with your next choice. What will you choose? Thank you for listening and for investing in yourself. I believe in you. Your potential is endless. Now go out there and create the life you deserve.